you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland. So this week's show is number 82. We're getting along, clipping along. Sorry we missed you last week, but never fear, we're back to review more international rugby and preview some of the stuff upcoming. As far as this week's show is concerned, we do have a lot of test match footy to go through, five games to preview.
Serious amount of test match footy this coming weekend.
Exactly. We're just going to open the show with a look back on the wrap up of the Bledisloe series. Obviously we had tests 3 and 4 in the interim since last we were speaking, so we're going to look back on those games and do a review, and then we will pivot into the Tri Nations from there and look ahead to this Saturday's match between the All Blacks and Argentina. And then following that, we're going to look ahead to the Autumn Nations Cup. We'll do a brief roundup of the Six Nations as well, which we missed the final action of in terms of reviewing. But then we're going to pivot on to each team in the Autumn Nations Cup and what they kind of want to get out of it. We'll preview the games, but talking about the teams broadly, about what this cup could mean for them and what they'll be looking to get out of each.
Absolutely. From there, we're going to pivot on. We're also going to just take a quick look at Spain's dual tests against Uruguay. We're also going to look at Super Rugby Unlocked, some of the domestic rugby going across, the Premier 10s tournament, which wrapped up over the weekend out in Bermuda, and wrapping up the show with all the rugby news of the week. And remember, you can, I know we tend to go on and on and on, we're trying to rectify that and get a little bit tighter, but you're probably laughing to yourself looking at the run time as it is and how we failed to do that. But remember, if you do want to access any particular points or us talking about any particular things or games that you're interested in, there should be timestamps in the description, and we'll do our best to get that in the comments section as early as possible as well. So you can navigate your way to the bits you're interested in, or you can trooper your way through the whole show.
Indeed, yeah, do it in bits, bite-sized chunks if you like. But yes, indeed. And if you're new here, then very welcome. If for those who are returning as well, welcome back. But if you enjoy the content, please do like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment as well, because we do enjoy hearing your takes on all the rugby as well, and it informs us in doing the show, as well as just creating a good discourse on the channel, which we're all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, without any further ado, I guess we will go on to the first thing, which was our Bledisloe wrap up. So Bledisloe obviously happened. The All Blacks claimed it in Test 3.
They did.
They managed
convincingly.
It was very, very convincing. The Wallabies picked a green team in more ways than one. The jerseys were quite nice, but also a few youthful debutants and stuff out there, and it didn't quite go to plan, to be honest.
No, I mean, as far as the first game is concerned, the game that perhaps mattered most out in Sydney, the All Blacks showed up, and they showed up something fierce. I mean, Australia obviously wounded by that loss of James O'Connor, and had the young lad Noah Lolesio, who we'd heard a lot about and yet to have seen. And the poor lad had something of a horror show in that first half, that first 40, his first game in. But I mean, the tone was set very early on. New Zealand were very, very physical. Dungunu got himself yellow carded after 3 minutes.
Didn't help.
It didn't help indeed. And from there the All Blacks kicked on. I mean, they were quite clinical. They scored some beautiful tries. Thought Richie Mo'unga was excellent.
He was,
and they had the game killed by half time.
This is true. Rendering things like the tactical decision to leave Tupou on the bench that time for the first time so that you could spring him in the second half, which was a good plan, I thought, and definitely
worked the following week,
but definitely was moot in the context of the Bledisloe. It just meant one of their key weapons wasn't in the fray as the game was getting away from them.
And one of the key physical components of it, like as impressive as the 4 tries were, there were some nice moves in there. It was a game it was a performance and a domination that was built entirely on sort of physical dominance. I thought there were some huge performances from some guys in that New Zealand pack in that game. I thought like Shannon Frizzell, Patrick Tuipulotu, they really, really stood up. And even from a defensive point of view, the Wallabies, they had this green guy at 10, they had Simone in for the first time at 12. They were trying to generate momentum, but every time they tried to get a little bit of go for it around the ruck, they were stopped, and the All Blacks did a really great job of shutting them down on the inside and still holding their width on the outside. So every time the ball got into Lolasio's hands, he was just presented with nothing, no kind of picture. And they ended up doing a lot of loose kicking, and they got a donut in the first half. I mean, they couldn't get a play off against that Wallaby defence, against that All Black defence, I should say.
Yeah, it's true. I think as much as like credit to the All Black pack for doing that, there were we were wary of the few going into that in our preview of that test, the likes of Salakai Loto, Ned Hannigan in that pack, who I just fear are a little soft at international level, and particularly against a monstrous pack like that All Blacks thing, and it kind of proved the case
It was a pack built for the purpose of dominating the Wallabies up front, and it very much did that. There were some cute moves in there as well from the All Blacks, like wrapping up the whole Wallaby pack in a dominant mole, then moving them to one face to the open side, and then having a massive overlap back the blind side, which Tuna Guafe butchered, but then scored the try, so it was all good.
Yes, indeed. It's one of those, if you score, it's no bother, but possibly could have passed.
Possibly could have passed, but that was a lovely try. So there was some nice subtle manoeuvring of the Wallaby pack around, but it was all built, every inch of it was built on just physical domination and collision winning, and the Wallabies couldn't buy a collision. Like, Nick White was frozen out of the game, everything was going backwards, and they just couldn't generate any of that momentum that they got in Wellington, and it was flat, and then it got worse, and 26-0 was a brutal first half
for sure,
and stunned by it.
That being said, defiant to the end, credit to the young debutant Lolosio for grabbing that try. It was quite a nice try, and it was a nice little line that he picked.
It was the first time they generated a bit of speed and tempo. It was the first time they got Pataia on the ball in space, and he actually sat down.
He is a real playmaker for them, definitely potential. And we saw a bit more of his potential in the week after as well, when they had a bit more of a balanced side. I don't know if we can pivot onto that as well, because obviously it was a dead rubber in the context of the Bledisloe, but it wasn't in the context of the Tri Nations.
No, absolutely not.
Very much an important win for the Wallabies to get back on track, and a really good one for Dave Rennie as well. Like, if you were to open up your coaching tenure with 4 games against the All Blacks, coming out like 2-1-1 is
fine,
not bad. Like,
it's a funny one. It's hard to even define the meanings of these things, but the records in certain grounds are an absolute curiosity. Like, if you were to tell me that the Wallabies were going to go, 1-2-1, 1 win, 2 defeats, and 1 draw, you might have guessed that the win would be at Suncorp and the draw would be at Wellington.
Yeah.
Somehow you might have guessed that, and the All Blacks to take the wins in Eden Park and Sydney. I don't know what it is, but as the All Blacks have a great record at Eden Park and struggle at times at Wellington, so too is the case with the Wallabies in Suncorp and Brisbane versus the stadium in Sydney. It's a curiosity.
One thing I will say is about Suncorp is just the way it's not a cricket ground for one, so it's not an Aussie rules thing. It's like the crowd are actually right on top of you, which helps a lot, because an Aussie crowd can be a vocal thing, and there were crowds at all these games, which was tremendous to see, watching from a world away and a lockdown away as well. It was some of my favourites. So I've never been so engaged in anthems of 2 teams that I don't normally love their anthems, but I was vibing off every second in terms of the pre-match pageantry that went into these fixtures. It was great, and it was great to see the crowds. And the Wallabies really did come to play at in Brisbane. They were
it was obviously a different team. It was a different All Black team as well. Like, All Blacks had sealed the deal. They had lifted the cup. That photo there is from Sydney the week before. They had won Bledisloe, and so the All Blacks rotated out. Caleb Clark. They rotated in a lot of different players. Like, there was a rake load of changes from their point of view. So things were definitely slightly different, but they did try to bring that same defensive intensity. And the key change, as bad as you'd feel for Lolosio, was bringing Reece Hodge back in as a 10. And he might not be an out and out 10, but Reece Hodge is a very fine player with a very good head on him, and he's going to be a crucial part of this Rennie Aussie side for a couple of years now.
For sure. What that performance will give you such faith in him. He had to slot in, and he did.
Nearly the first phase of the game, the All Blacks are bringing that defensive pressure again, and he puts in a beautiful little probing kick between the 2 halfbacks. They get a lucky bounce, but they finish it beautifully.
Yeah.
But that one moment is just a chink in that All Black defence's armour that sits them down
for the rest of the game.
Pretty much the rest of the game. They never quite got that defensive pressure back.
Because they're coming into the game thinking Hodge isn't a 10. We'll bring up that pressure. He won't know what to do with it. He'll kick us the ball. We'll run back. But no, Hodge is a very experienced, savvy footballer, and he can slot in a 10 despite not being an out and out one. He'll recognise the space, and just a bit more like that assuredness and that confidence. Like, Hodge has been there for ages. He knows he can. If worse comes to worse, he can take a contact. Or like you could see in some of Lolosio's plays the week before, he's behind the gain line. I don't want to be buried in contact. I need to do something. Kick it away. Like all of that little young man panic that just isn't there in an elder statesman like
Hodge. Very, very controlled and balanced footballer. Lovely kicker of a football. And he gave them just a different edge and a feeling of control, and sat down that All Black defence, which was crucial. Yeah. That one play was actually so massive. You know, you do that little thing, you put that little memory in the memory bank for the All Black defence. Then the ball sits up, and all of a sudden Banks gets a ball out the back door, and Tom Wright has a try in his first
on
cap.
debut. As you love to see it. Yeah, no, it's always a good sign when the debutant winger especially is getting a bit of meat nice and early. And he actually had a very, very tidy game, all things considered. He was dangerous and probing on counter-attack. He was solid in terms of the pendulum out at the back. I definitely think with Banks in as well, they kind of have a bit more balance in terms of that backfield.
100%.
But they looked very assured, and Wright looked very assured as well, considering it was his first cap. Lovely weaving run in to set up what was the first of 2 red cards, which did kind of put a weird note on the game. It was played predominantly with 14 men for the second half.
Yeah, that was sort of the intrigue of it. Like, the Wallabies had got their plays off against the All Blacks. The All Blacks come back with a try, and it was an even enough game. There was definitely more tempo to what the Wallabies were doing. Their pack were giving some punches as well as taking them, as much as they were sort of physically outmatched.
The Phillips, or not Phillip and
Rob
Simmons coming in and gave them a little bit more balance in that
absolutely
row.
And then you take Tui Pilatu out of that All Black pack, as well as Scott Barrett was playing and Sam Whitelock. It was Tui Pilatu-less.
Yes, it kind of came like this, the leveling out.
So there wasn't quite that same domination in the contact, and then we had an even game, and then all of a sudden, off a kick return, I believe, Tuangafasi comes in with a bad high shot, and it's one of those ones where there's been a lot of talk over the week. It was bizarre, sort of listening to it on comms, hearing Tim Horan, and then finding out afterwards,
retrospectively, that our friend Justin Marshall, normally a fair caller of a game, absolutely wrong.
Yeah, a fair caller of games. So I think I've racked up like Tim Horan, Justin Marshall, and now John
Kerwin posted on the breakdown,
going on and on about this not being a red card, or that this is some kind of injustice. It's a curiosity. Like, the next one came in from Lachlan Swinton, which is afterwards actually a worse one. But as far as the rules are concerned, this is a point blank easy red card decision, and this is based on a framework that was released well over a year ago now.
That I remember we covered it on the podcast. We went through it. Everyone got it. It was available. You could Google it and find it.
Yeah, there's a whole detailed list in terms of the framework. There's videos as well as written forms that you can find to see how they were judging high tackles. And we'll start by just saying, like, first of all, you should know what it is. You've no business as a play caller, as someone who's employed to talking about rugby, to be in any way surprised by any of those red cards.
Yes.
If you have a shoulder to the head, that's an initial decision of a red card. And it is not the case, as some people are saying based on what they're hearing from refs, it is not the case that any bit of leg bending is a mitigating factor and therefore just a yellow, go on, sir.
Yeah.
It's not the case. There's aggravating factors and mitigating factors. So you have an initial decision, and then you weigh up aggravating factors, and if there's more aggravating factors than there are mitigating factors, you can actually boost it up. So you can have an initial yellow, but it's so blatant, it's in the open field, and
it's cynical, it's killing a play, they have a chance for a try, all of that.
It can be boosted up, etc. A just a penalty can be boosted up to a yellow can be boosted up to a red with aggravating factors. And as it was with the Tuangafasi situation, yes, there's a little bit of a dip from Wright, and yes, he's a bigger man, but because he's in the open field, he has a clear point of view, he starts high and he finishes high, he gets his technique all wrong and ends up with his shoulder in the head. There's absolutely no way under the tackle framework it can be any other decision. It's the easiest call in the world for that referee, and if he calls anything else, he's made a blatant mistake in the context of those rules. Likewise with the Swinton one, which I think is less controversial. You know, when you've Tuangafasi, you've got a big man standing still with a little man running at him.
Yeah, you can have sympathy for his one. In fact, like, he didn't get low enough. But the guy is so dynamic that he's a big tight head. Like, it's tough, but it is a clear cut red card.
Swinton's one is almost worse because he's the dynamic man in that situation. The ball carrier's standing still, and he's the guy who's flying in.
And it's Whitelock he hit. The guy's like 6'9" or whatever. Yeah. Like, how are you hitting him so high and so violently? It was terrible. Like, that one was egregious for more reasons than one.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that they already have the man.
Yeah, they're a man advantage and leading against the All Blacks. What are you doing?
So as far as being surprised about it or in any way confused about it, I don't understand. Like, as a fan, sure, but that the play callers are in there to explain to the fans why these decisions are being made, and the guys in Australia and New Zealand failed utterly in that regard.
They really did. But it's not the first time we've seen this. Like with ELVs, I remember noting with the high ball collisions, before it was the high tackles, it was the high ball, because there was collisions in the air, there were people landing, and World Rugby did do similar. They released a framework that was trying to clear it up, and they did so, and all the vocab was there, and it made it clear.
If you land on the head, it's a red. If you land on the shoulder, it's a yellow. And that persists to this day.
It does still. But for the first season of it, you'd be watching some Super Rugby from Australia or something, or like an Aussie conference, and you'd be listening to the Aussie commentators, and not like they would just ignore it. Sometimes there'd be massive collisions. A guy lands on his head, and they're just going like talking about something else, or going like, "Oh, let's play on," And it's like, you may want it to play on. You may think, "Oh, the game's gone soft. You should just play on there." And it's like, even if you think that, you have to qualify it by saying that's not the law. Like, no, you're a play caller, and
you should know the law if you're calling the game. Like, we don't get paid for this, but we actually bothered to do a bit of research on it. So it's actually super disappointing to see the likes of Justin Marshall and Tim Horan and John Kerwin, these legends of the game, who are calling and explaining the game to fans to do such a poor job in that regard, and just an ignorant job. That's just disappointing. As far as whether it should or shouldn't be, obviously that's going to be open to interpretation. It's going to be open to opinion. I would err on the side of these head contacts should stop. It's poor technique in the tackle.
That's the main thing.
It's poor technique that results in the opposition getting hit in the head. And as far as like John Kerwin was saying in his sort of weaving rant about it, that like these red cards are killing games, I can think of so few examples where that's the case. The team is punished. It's a harshly punished thing, because it's a harsh thing to do to someone, catching them in the head. But it's not like there's no examples. I would say that like the examples of games being absolutely killed by a red card are pretty few and far between, and they don't include last week's game just because the All Blacks ended up losing. There was a red card each, both extreme fair calls, and what followed to pivot on was actually a cracking game of rugby through the second half.
Yes, exactly. No, it was absolutely madness to be reading some of these responses to that red. But as you say, no, the spectacle wasn't spoiled at all, and it just created a little bit more space on the pitch that you can try and attack. Then it's like just a little more room for some of these outside backs and things. And the ones who responded better were definitely the Wallabies.
Well, it was interesting. Like they obviously were down a bit of heft themselves. Obviously, the All Blacks were in losing Tuangafasi, losing just that bit more heft, but it was interesting, like all that forward dominance that we talked about in the Bledisloe game that they had won the week before, where they took the cup, that was kind of dissipated, and what was left was a pretty even pack battle. And then sort of the clinical edge that the All Blacks had shown the prior week sort of disappeared. And even the try they scored was not clinically taken. Lemape threw a pass that was poor, and it just sort of broke. In the end, I can't remember who scored it. It was Rico who scored it. With that dot down.
One-handed dot down that he's persisting
with it. Yeah, absolutely. But likewise, just before half time, they had a line out from 5 out to take the lead. Where I think it was a drawn game, or it might have been a 3-point lead for the Wallabies. But they had a line out 5 out going for a try right on half time, which is where you think this is New Zealand City.
Yeah.
And Australia do make the play; they steal the line out, but it was just that lack of a clinical edge from the All Blacks that arguably you could worry about. You could also attribute it to the huge raft of changes that came in.
There was a raft of changes. I thought it was quite a disjointed and not a great balance to the team. Just if you were to read it out to me on paper, which we did before watching it, the centres I'm not convinced of when you have Leonard Brown, and then Geordie Barrett at fullback with D-Mac on the bench, and then you bring D-Mac off the bench to come onto the wing where he's frozen out
towards the end of it.
It's not really using your weapons correctly or deploying them properly.
It was definitely not two distributors. It was one distributor. If you got Leonard Brown and Geordie in those potential distribution roles, you haven't actually got a second distributor out there, and so it kind of proved, I thought, without that forward dominance and without that physical dominance that they had the week prior, they did lack a little something, and they ended up struggling to get some go forward. And the clinical edge and the creativity elements that have been sort of on the back burner as they sort of lean into a much more physical game than they even would have been maybe 4 years ago, and back even when they were winning World Cups. It's a lot more physical, this Ian Foster All Black team, and without that physical dominance, they didn't look great,
Yeah.
and the Wallabies kind of exploited it. I did think it was a high standard game, but the
yeah.
All Blacks they couldn't really get much off on offense, and that's definitely going to be a concern. For them.
It was a concern for sure. I will caveat by saying it was a whole host of changes. But then from the Wallabies' point of view, the mentioning Tupou in terms of game one, he was frozen out. The game was over by the time he came off. But this time around, yes, springing Tupou from the bench with 30 odd minutes to go is a great shout, because he just won every single carry and then got on top in the scrum as well.
Yeah.
Such a dynamic guy, and as you say, he's kind of one of those like really explosive athletes, fast twitch, explosive and really powerful. Does not mind his cardio at all.
No.
Just dumps himself into every play, 110% in every instance, which is fantastic. But it just means when you have the option, because you do have another solid tight head in Alatoa, it's a really useful thing to be able to spring him from the bench, and something they probably learned from the second test more so than the first or the third.
When the All Black bench just come on and
the last quarter was just, they were nowhere, and they were having to haul Phillip off after him making like 20 odd tackles and bruised and bloodied, and it's like, what do we actually have to spring in the second half to help us out? And you can see even with France, they're bringing like the likes of Camille Chat off the bench. There's a lot of...
It's a similar kind of dynamic to the Camille Chat thing, where you have this really explosive guy coming on for the more solid guy.
Yeah.
And I definitely love it as a play. As far as Tupou is concerned, unstoppable in the loose and in the scrum.
Tank. He's a Thor even.
For sure. Like Tongan Thor, Listen, we were hearing about him years ago in that capacity, but right now he is the best tight head out there. He is phenomenal to watch. There isn't a better tight head out there, both at scrum time and and in ball carrying around the loose. He's extremely explosive. He's tightened up his discipline. Haven't seen him make too many discipline errors. When they did come in, they came in sort of after he was tired, when he was starting. In those opening 2 games. But certainly when he's at fever pitch, coming on off the bench, he's an incredible specimen to watch. And he did give the Wallabies that extra edge physically to actually start getting on top of the All Blacks and win the game for them.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he's such a difference maker and will become a key man in this Wallaby side going forward. And like, the only caveat is obviously there's no Springboks in this year's championship, so there's a real trial of fire when you're trying to scrummage against the Springboks. But in terms of passing every test so far, he's done that with spades. And then I suppose with conclusions from all of that Bledisloe series, what do you make of it?
4 tests, 4 great games, pretty much every game. Obviously, the one in Sydney was the biggest blowout, and that was a tough watch for the
Eden
Wallabies.
Park was tough enough for the Wallabies as well. But
it was. I mean, the All Blacks are still the best side. Like, their conclusions, they're looking at a mighty physical forward pack that, like, they'll quietly be thinking could compete with the likes of South Africa and England, and I'm certainly that matchup is going to be more exciting perhaps than it ever has been. If the run game has suffered a little bit, but even so, at times their clinicality has shone through, and Richie Mo'unga and Bowden Barrett and Caleb Clark coming into the team is a huge draw for them. And they won the series. They did it last week. They still have some issues to sort out in the centres and in their I think just personnel issues, but also just creativity issues.
In terms of the multi-phase. But their instincts are still intact. When someone kicks loosely to them, their kick return instincts are on point as always. Like, they just have that.
They have some phenomenal players, and Caleb Clark was one of the finds of the tournament. Tui Pilatu has finally reached his potential and looks one of the best locks in the world. Likewise, Tuanga Fassi as a tight head has changed things completely for them. They had a very solid line out drive. There were some issues at scrum, little wobbling issues at scrum, so not without issues, but they are still in a decent place where they can stake a claim of being the best side in the world, and they're certainly in the mix with those sides, and they're certainly still on top of their sort of, they're little brothers in terms of the size of the nations, but they're big brothers in a rugby context. And
Bledisloe is seemingly just a resident in the All Blacks dressing room at home. They managed to secure it yet again.
18 straight years or something along those lines.
It's been a phenomenal slew of dominance, but strings of positive things for the Wallabies for sure. This was a more competitive Bledisloe than we've been treated to for the last few years for sure. There was definitely, I like the balance. I like what Rennie's brought. I think, to be fair, like, Australia, their tradition of rugby and running rugby and their kind of ability to spot a try and take a try, that is very copacetic with what Dave Rennie was trying to do, be it with the Chiefs or with Glasgow. He has an instinct for that, tries to get his teams playing that way. So I think this match is going to work very well for them. I think all the players have bought in. I think he's by and large picked the right personnel as well. I think the faith he put in Nick White was well founded.
There was a lot of chat pre-tournament about dumping Nick White for a Tate McDermott, and he definitely, even the Wellington test alone, but also since then, very nice controller of a game decision, especially after James O'Connor went. But I mean, going forward for the Wallabies, there's a bundle of potential. I mean, I really like the idea of having O'Connor at 10, possibly Reece Hodge at 12, because he's very tough, but he's also got that boot to bail out O'Connor if need be.
Passing game.
And then you've got Pataya at 13, who's very distribution. He can be a distributor. He can also be a strike runner.
He's physical as well. He's good in the contact.
Beautiful runner of a ball. And then maybe having a solid Tom Banks at fullback, and then you've options between Wright and Korobedi and Dungunu on the wing. Like, that's a really balanced backline. And I think Reece Hodge was the missing element that came into it last week. And I'd be excited about seeing him and O'Connor like in the
and
10
Nick White.
Yeah,
all
and Nick White.
All of them
distributing together. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and actually, to be fair, your Pataya is such a distributor as well, in a different sense. He'll distribute post-contact or just get the hands. But he
can also pick a line if need be. And likewise, Reece Hodge, he can play 12 and truck it up if need be.
Yeah.
But he has a great boot, which is key. I think in terms of just the difference it made having smart kicking in terms of sitting down the All Black defence was massive in that last game.
Yes,
and I think they're slowly putting it together. Their pack is a little slighter, so it has to be quicker and more dynamic.
For sure,
and that's something they're figuring out.
I have a lot of faith in Philip. I think he's a good find for them. I'm not sure they've found his best potential partner yet.
Yeah,
like certainly from a Leinster point of view, if Scott Fardy was in there with him, that would suddenly be a very, very, very good second row thing. Whereas, like,
Rob Simmons is fine.
Rob Simmons is fine. He's an actual second row. Salakai Loto, I think, is
more of a back
row. He's kind of a bit like Tyg Byrne in Ireland. He's like, is he an international caliber second row, or is he a little light?
Yeah, because the job only gets tougher. There's a lot of just across world rugby. There's a lot of bruising second rows out there, and you've got to be up to the fight if you're going to play in that position because it's coming at you. And that they actually suffered in that area in their line-out mole defence.
Yes,
they didn't really get anything off in there, and that's something they'll need to find.
And just the heft of their maul, like they managed to actually get a bit of go for, because their maul structure we were talking about, the Brumbies, they know how to maul it, but they just didn't have the heft to move them in the first few tests. But then even when they took Salakai Loto out and replaced him with an actual second rower, they managed to get a little bit of purchase at the maul in the final test, which was good to see. So there's definitely shades of positivity everywhere,
and a great scrum which they haven't had forever, and that's exciting. And seeing that scrum matching up against some of the European ones, obviously we won't see it 2020, but that it bodes nicely, and bodes well for the future for Australia. And they have 2 games left in the season, obviously, as have New Zealand.
Yes,
but that was it was a brilliant Bledisloe Cup. It was a great watch, and it just adds levels of intrigue to the seasons to come.
It does, for sure. But that we will stick with the Tri-Nations, as we have another game this weekend. We will move on to New Zealand v Argentina, Los Pumas. It's good to see them back. We haven't seen them since literally the World Cup was the last time we were seeing them in a competitive context.
You could argue that we haven't seen the true Pumas
for longer than that. Yeah, for sure. On Saturday at 6:10 a.m. our time, which is lovely, brutal,
absolutely brutal,
at Bankwest Stadium, Parramatta in Western Sydney. And it's going to be reffed by Angus Gardner, which I'm excited about. I'm a big fan of Angus. I think
it's 5:10 local time over there, so it's more reasonable if you're in Sydney, obviously.
Yes, indeed.
Angus Gardner, we have a neutral ref. I think we can all be relieved at that.
Yes, first time in a few weeks.
Yeah, as far as the weather's concerned, we're expecting 20 degrees Celsius with some light to moderate winds and some clear skies. So I think both sides are going to be happy with that.
Yeah, chance to throw the ball around, chance to play some perfect rugby. You're not going to overheat at 20 degrees either. Yep, that all sounds A1.
Absolutely. We're going to take a run through on the game, just looking at it from the perspective of both teams going into this one. Obviously, first game for Argentina, but we're going to start, first of all, with who we were just talking about. The side listed as the home side for arbitrary reasons. The All Blacks. And obviously, this is for them. Is a chance to sort of rediscover some mojo. Obviously 2 weeks left in the season if you're an All Black team. You got this week, and then you got to play Argentina in 2 weeks time, and then that's it. Wrap it up, go home.
That's it. A very short season, but certainly in the context of like last time, it was a very changed side they went for with Bledisloe 4, which is fine. Obviously you need to give some minutes to other people, but they lost that game. And losing back-to-back fixtures is not something that the All Blacks take kindly to or tend to do very often at all.
Also rewarding, guys who are on losing teams, guys who come in for losing performances with a second chance isn't something you regularly see from the Kiwi coaching staff. And I'd say Foster can be a prickly enough character when it comes to that sort of thing. So I would say the likes of Nyani Laumape cannot look forward to playing this week. Sever Reece, some of these guys who came in, even Scott Barrett, as well as he played, the yellow card he gave away in that game was absolutely
egregious and
terrible,
costly
very
at the
costly.
very end.
So I suspect he might be feeling the wrath as well, and obviously they'll be without Tuanga Fassi, given he had a ban for his high shot.
That's correct. Yeah, he's going to miss out on the rest of the tournament.
So it from their point of view, in terms of rediscovering it, I think you're going to see we have Richie up there. We'll learn the team probably before we end this show, but perhaps not in time to discuss it now. So we haven't got the team sheets in front of us, but we have a decent idea of what they're going to go with. They're probably going to go with Moanga returning and the usual suspects, Barr coming back in. I'd love to see them go with Rico at centre, but they'll probably go Goodhue, Leonard Brown. I'd love to see Satutu back in, but regardless really of what they go with in the squads, I think it's pretty clear that they're going to try and I would say lean into what they've been doing well so far, which is that physicality.
Yeah.
And I'd say you're talking about a Pumas team that hasn't played a competitive test match since the World Cup,
which is a year ago now.
It's
over a year ago. Sure, the anniversary of the final was a few weeks ago, and they were nowhere near the final themselves. So more than a year since Argentina have played a competitive fixture.
So I would imagine that the All Blacks are going to try and just use sort of the match fitness and speed and physicality and that they have to shock the Pumas into shipping yards and losing contacts and then moving the ball when there's an overlap and scoring tries.
They'll be looking to start quickly for sure and just shock them. That's it. When you come in against a side that's coming in a little cold, you're going to want to try and impose yourself quickly, get yourself up to speed quickly, find your rhythm early, and then strike off and well.
One of the things that's a factor is obviously they got the losing bonus point last week and the bonus point the week prior, so they're 2 points clear of Australia.
Putting them in a great position.
If they can get a bonus point win here, they've got 1 foot over the line as far as winning the tournament's concerned, which I'm sure they want to do.
Yes.
I think there's no scope for complacency, obviously, and there's a little scope for concern just in some areas. But it's got to be about holding the ball and bruising contacts and making those Argentinian players make a lot of tackles against these giant All Black forwards who are so good. Like, they're versatile and they move really well and they're super powerful. And they really, really do home when Aaron Smith is at 9, I think, as well. He was one we didn't mention who came out for Perenara.
That's right.
As good as Perenara is, Aaron Smith, for me, still the best 9 in the world. And I include DuPont in that. I think he's that good. The way the movement that Aaron Smith gets off the ball, off the base of the ruck.
It's his tempo. Tempo. The main job of the halfback is to create the tempo. And TJ is a full 10 kilos heavier than Aaron Smith and is more combative, will get a turnover steal or something. He's more physical, he's more capable to be combative and nitty.
He's great off the bench.
He is. He adds something off the bench, but as far as establishing your early tempo, no one does a better job of that than Aaron Smith.
No.
And he can do it rain, hail or shine. He is so accurate with his passing and so quick to resource the breakdown.
With the first
and
passes
ambitious with the support running as well. They do halfbacks very well in New Zealand. Even a Mitre 10 caliber halfback has the right instincts all the time, Chris Christie's and all of that. But Aaron Smith, Chris Christie, is it?
No, Finlay Christie.
Chris Christie
is a big American politician.
Different guy. Chris Christie, completely different. But as far as setting the tempo, he is the template, the prototypical halfback. He's everything that every young scrum half should aspire to, and he pushes the game so well. Even his box kicking game has come on leaps and bounds in the last 2 years. And he doesn't go to it often. He's deceptive to it. If he decides to do it, he does it quickly. There's none of this kind of caterpillar rucking that you get a lot of the time in the Northern Hemisphere.
He's much quicker with everything he does.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think they'll look to keep the ball in hand early. They'll look to dominate those contacts. There is some scope for concern. They will have to mind the ball a bit. They don't want to play the Pumas into the game.
No.
And they did in those first 2 Bledisloe matches. They did at times turn over some cheap ball.
They did.
So they do have to be just a little more conscious of minding the pill than they have been. Just in case the Pumas, because the Pumas are this unknown entity, and they are lethal at their best. And the last thing the All Blacks want coming off a loss is to be caught with their pants down, coming in a little soft, dropping some balls, and then all of a sudden they're countering on you, and they are quick and they are up to speed, and that's shocking. You have to really own the ball and tire them and weaken them. And then the other thing you'd obviously be looking for is just that little bit more spark and that little bit more creativity in midfield. Even if it's not coming from the midfield, if you do have a dual distributor thing, whether it's Mackenzie who comes in at fullback or Barrett at fullback and Moong at 10 or whatever they do, I would just love to see a little bit more distributors linking, distribution in the wide channels, distribution in the narrow channels, picking nice passes and getting guys like Goodhue and Leonard Brown over the line. And once they do breach that gain line, the support play, the instincts are all there. The passing, you're not going to have an issue with the quality of pass or any of that. Like, it's all there. The tries will be taken once they're made.
Yes,
and
indeed.
that's absolutely what the All Blacks are going to be looking at. But they just need to be wary of minding the ball. Maybe don't throw the 50-50, just hold it and take it around the corner, because the Argentinians aren't going to want to make tackles, and they're going to love turnover ball.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that.
I think they will be mindful of it, but I don't think they're going to be playing with a fear of it. I actually think they're going to find themselves more confident going in. Like when they have their players come back, you saw a bit of it like in terms of the distributors linking. I was making the point prior to I think it was the Eden Park test that we hadn't really seen Moonga and Barrett link on the multi-phase. We'd seen them do some good stuff individually, some steps in the open field and putting other people into place, but we haven't seen them link. But then that lovely try with the Moonga dropping on the toe, chip, gather, finds Bowden on the support line. You saw the potential.
The try in Sydney as well, where Barrett chipped it for Moonga to score as well.
Like you can see them starting to vibe off each other as the dual distributor role. So it's just they're building layers to that, but I don't think they want to compromise their attacking flair. I actually think they want to go after the Pumas. I think normal service for the like in terms of like, as much as it was impressive for the Wallabies to go 4 tests with the All Blacks and have not a winning record but have 1 win and a draw out of it, that's good for the Wallabies. That's not so good for a new coach in the All Blacks. It's not a good precedent to set. I'm sure he's under pressure. Normal service in this game against Argentina is them pumping Argentina, and I think it'll be a bit of pressure on him to deliver just that, and on the whole team to deliver just that.
They certainly have a decent defensive model that you can look at from Bledisloe 3 in terms of what they did to the Wallabies, and I think that the Argentinian halfbacks, it looks like it's going to be Cabelli and Sanchez again, and they're vulnerable in perhaps the exact same way that Lolosio and Nick White were that day, where if they can do what they did to Australia, which was managed to dominate collisions, like just the individual battles were won so convincingly on the inside that men were never sucked in, and just like they did against Australia, and they've been great at this, it's been one of the best things about their defence, holding their width, having an absolute blanket of black defenders, never coming in, trusting their inside man, because from an Argentine perspective, your danger men are on the wings. Imov and Delgi, it looks like it'll be perhaps Cordero as well, with Carreras from at fullback coming in. That's quality.
That's where their danger is.
That's absolutely dangerous, and you don't want to be giving those guys space. But if they can dominate those collisions on the inside, if they can get their Sam Canes attacking the pill, making a mess of things, Ardi Savia, the like, getting in, spoiling the ball, making it frustrating for the Argentinian halfbacks, they're going to put air on it a lot of the time, and even if recent seasons are anything to go by, you know, the loose kicking from Cabelli and Sanchez,
or loose passing. I know
once the forward pack starts going backwards, their heads can go,
and they can fling it while they do shovel shite sometimes, where they fire it wide. Like you can get picks if you're bringing a lot of line speed. You can pick off some good intercepts as well, because they are trying to get to the wide channel, and I think that All Black defensive shape is kind of like an antidote to it. I think it's actually kind of. It's a very tough matchup.
Force them to suck you in on the inside, force them to win battles on the inside. And certainly if they can swallow up the likes of Matera, and if they can make the likes of
Petty or something,
Guido Petty go backwards, and Alemano as well, like in those tight areas, that's going to be huge. Like obviously the Argentine picture involves those guys really stepping up. But from a Kiwi point of view, you know, if they can shut all of that down, they make a mess of it. That'll be massive as well. But there is scope for danger, and they do have to be mindful of that danger that the Pumas possess out wide. Likewise, I actually think that up front, you know, they got their pants pulled down at scrum time. They're going to be without Offat Tumunafasi, and I tell you, if the World Cup is anything to go by, the one thing Ledesma got right
was the
scrumming. And Tata Chaparro, on certainly on last evidence, is a very fine scrummager at loosehead. And if you've got Tyrrell Lomax or whoever you got coming in,
Certainly Laulala would be
struggling. Yeah, exactly. Those guys might struggle with it a little bit. So that definitely, I think the heft of Tui Piloto would help coming
Yes.
back in, but they do have to be mindful of the scrum, and you would hope that they'd be working on that. Like, that's the way errors can compound. If they're knocking balls on, if they're not minding the pill, then all of a sudden, you know, scrum Argentina, then penalty Argentina, then you're exactly where you don't want to be.
Yes.
So they do have to be mindful of that. But on balance, I think, yes, bullish confidence and physicality will get it home for them.
I think so. I think so. And then ideally a bit more flair in the back line, but just building those layers as far as their multi-phase. But then if we pivot on to the Pumas, Argentina, who we haven't seen for a wee while, this is great. Like, we're great waiting and anticipating them playing as well. It's been that long. It was a disappointing World Cup campaign for them, for sure. They were nowhere near beating England and France, and they struggled even with Tonga and the US at times in that group.
They did, really, Tonga in particular.
They were a disjointed mess, to be honest. They kind of, as you said, they lost some of their tempo-driven, wide attacking play that had got them so far in years gone by. They didn't capitalise on the success of the Jaguares that season.
They traded it all in seemingly under Ledesma, and I really hope that this trend doesn't continue, because the big man is still in charge. But they traded it all in for a slightly more physical, but even less disciplined, higgledy-piggledy kind of mess of a thing. That was failed utterly. I mean, they lost to France on opening day and never looked back as far as decent performances.
They were unfortunate in that was a deciding game with England being in their pool. That was like such an important one.
It's not like England were very good that World Cup. But it's not like they didn't give them a game.
No.
Like, they didn't give them a game.
No,
so it's not like one of these hard luck stories, we had England, we just lost to France, and then we had, like, they didn't give them a game.
And they lost touch with what had been really a key weapon for them. Certainly in the out half stakes, they didn't back your man from the Jaguares. Instead, they brought your man in from Cast.
Erda
Pajeta, and he's like a bit more clunky.
Diaz-Benicia is the guy they left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like, what are we trying to do here? It was disappointing. But just looking at they've had a training squad. You were saying they've actually played a couple of matches against.
They've played a couple of matches against an effective Australia A team. It's just an Australia 15, but there's Super Rugby 15 players and Super Rugby AU players, I should say, and some capped Wallaby internationals. Actually, Issy Naisarani was putting his hand up in that second game. He scored a couple of tries as far as the Wallabies are concerned.
Fair enough.
Bulldozing number 8, who certainly Dave Rennie could consider.
But
you know, they won their first game 19 points to 15, then won their second game, cut a bit more open, showed some of that attacking flair, wearing pink, funnily enough.
Interesting.
And scored some lovely tries in that second game.
57-24, I see that finished, which is like, that's very positive. And then even going to the Argentina 15 back in South America thing, we saw in the first game they struggled with Chile, the very impressive Chile, and then as they got their rhythm in, they started to find that tempo again, and it's just the Argentinian instincts can be very dangerous.
If they were completely cold and lost and not in a position to play Test rugby, they probably wouldn't have won those games, or certainly not won that second game as convincingly as they did. Given that there's decent Wallabies out there and there's Super Rugby players who've been playing rugby.
Yes.
So absolutely, it was definitely encouraging to see those results go positively.
Yeah, scoring 57 points in any game against any opposition is good, but against a Wallabies A side, that's pretty impressive. It bodes well for this. And then I was just going to say, in terms of the training squad that we have here and some of the squads in that game, one of my favourite things of all, we haven't got the actual named one, but I'm looking at the second rows and I see Petty and Alemano, and do you know who's missing from that?
Lavanini.
No Lavanini.
Yes.
Lavanini was a problem in that team for many, many years leading into that World Cup, and it culminated in that red card in the World Cup that was as foreseeable as anything, because the man's a head case, like, and as physical as he is, and then he puts in some good contacts. He does so for Leicester now, a match made in heaven, but he's still a head case, and it's a problem when your guy
when
gets
you get a guy who goes
cards.
blood red and gives away a red card every so often.
Every 3 or 4 games.
He was one of the most yellow carded players in Test rugby history going into that last World Cup.
And it's such a problem. I know there's a whole cohort of rugby fans who just love big hit guys and will just overlook that, willingly overlook that because he makes big hits. But it's like, it's such a thing. We actually heard of it even from last week, Lachlan, the red card, Lachlan Swinton. And it's like, there was one bit of coverage talking about it going, he, like, before the red card, he made like 13 tackles, 9 of them dominant. The Wallabies have really found someone here. It's like, No, he got red carded. That's the focus.
Made the killer losing play. And that was definitely the crack with Lavanese. So definitely, positive to see him out of there.
Yes.
In terms of what they are going to bring, like as much as we can big them up for beating the Australia A, it's
a significant step up.
Yeah, it's you couldn't ask for a worse betting in period. You're not only playing an All Blacks team, you're playing an All Blacks team that has been, gone through the gears and has a lot of Test rugby behind them already.
They have a full domestic season of Super Rugby Aotearoa. They have Mitre 10 thing going on in the background. They've had their North-South Island game. Now they've had four Bledisloe tests.
4 Test Bledisloe series. So their prime doesn't even cover how ready for this game they probably are in terms of physicality and fitness.
Yeah.
And
sharpness and cohesion as a team. It's always a tough thing.
Yeah.
You can do as many training games as you can have as many contact sessions as you want, but until you get out there, you're not really going to know if all these shapes you're running or all these patterns you're running are actually going to be effective against a top team.
So there's definitely that issue for them, and they're obviously going to be against one of the great sides in world rugby, but they have a settled enough team of their own with some guys coming in, but there's a lot of the same faces and the same names who we know can put out the big performances. If they are to make a game of this, it's going to involve that man there, Pablo Matera, country captain, having a proper shift, exploiting them, frustrating the All Blacks, winning contacts,
being game for the contact. It's going to start. The battle's going to
likewise
start.
Guido Petty in the tight as well. These guys, Shaparo, all of these guys, going to
have to be ready for what's coming. I'm sure they're going to talk about it. They're going to big up Montoya as well. Even like all of these guys are going to have to be
Montoya,
shocked.
the try scoring machine. That was one thing they got in the World Cup. He was top try scorer for a little while with a nice rumbling rolling maul.
Yes.
They shouldn't go back to that well too much, and I think they're going to have to be game for the contact just to make a game of it, but that is not an area that they want to lean into against this All Black team. And if Ledesma thinks he's going to rock up and score a load of maul tries, he's got a rude awakening coming. They're going to have to move the ball. Their danger guys are on the wings. One Imov is playing for the first time since 2015.
That's
and he's
fantastic.
Been brilliant
in
Europe.
So good for Racing. He's just an absolute Rolls Royce of a winger. He's just all the right instincts, still dangerous. He'll cut you to ribbons.
It's got to be about getting the ball wide and moving it with speed and catching the All Blacks off guard in that way. Like punishing them off turnover ball, constantly moving it and linking up. Like they run excellent tracking runs at their best. The Argentinian team, they have their built-in instincts for it.
Yes.
And they play a very quick, difficult to deal with wide game. And they could punish the All Blacks with some nice Sanchez passing and some good Orlando distribution as well, getting outside that All Black blitz and that All Black width. If they can match them up front, suck them in a little bit, it's all about going wide and getting their wingers on the ball and getting tries on the board. And I don't think that it's not about making it a tight forward battle at all.
No.
It's about matching them up front and then moving the pill. That's got to be the crack for Argentina.
We hope that's the outlook they come with it, but then maybe not going on World Cup evidence, but that is over a year ago. Hopefully they will know enough to try and play, stick to their I guess their guns in terms of their wide men have always been their historic point of strength. They need to get their depth right, need to get their passing accuracy right, and put the tempo in the game. Try and make it fast, make it wide.
And try on from a defensive point of view. I would it's a daunting task dealing with that All Black team. Obviously, there's simple things, chop tackles, not letting them get cheap meters, and then the other thing is just attacking the pill. Like you got the chop tackles in the narrow when they're in the wide channels, when the likes of Goodhue and Linnert Brown are on the ball. If they're trying to hold it in one hand, if they're looking to get an offload away,
swing an arm at that ball.
Absolutely, attacking the pill in contact is something that they're scoped to do, because the Wallabies did it a little bit, and you could see their knock-ons were generated.
It caused some spillages. Because the All Blacks generally are looking for offloads and are looking to get the ball out of their hands. So if you can help them to do so, you might generate some turnovers for yourself.
So that's got to be the plan for Argentina.
As far as you see it going, what do you reckon here?
It's like the predictions get even more moot when you're looking at this. Like you don't really know whether Argentina are going to be to the pace of it, and you don't really know whether the All Blacks are going to be as sharp as they should be, but you suspect they will. So I think it's a rough one for Argentina. They're like it's a very tough task.
A tough 4 weeks for them.
I'm really, really hoping that they show up with that they click, that they don't play the All Blacks into the game with silly errors or bad kicks,
or just fall off tackles in the first 10 minutes, and then it's suddenly a 2-score game.
Hoping for them to make a game of it. But my suspicion would be that the All Blacks, especially coming off a loss, will display a focus and a tempo and a sharpness and a power,
and also kind of a mean physicality that they can bring.
Yeah, that the Pumas won't be able to live with, for certainly not for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
So ultimately, if you want to ask for like a score or points margin, I'd say 25 to 30 points in the end, but perhaps a harsh 30-point loss. One of those ones where it was like 14 for a while.
Yeah, potentially something like that. I would like to see some really nice Argentinian plays as well, because I've missed Argentinian footy and stuff. I'd love to see him on the ball in space, running at them anyway.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the result, I'd like to see that pretty footy. But I do think, I'll say a 20-point margin in the end, but I suspect it could be a bit more than that in favour of the All Blacks.
Yes, unfortunately so. Listen, we are going to pivot on. That is the Southern Hemisphere sort of parked, and we have to go into a whole other direction, because since we've last done a show, this unfortunate trophy lift has taken place.
Yes, indeed.
England deserved winners of the Six Nations. What we missed is just a quick look back on Super Saturday. We previewed it on our last show, and we haven't been back since. It was perhaps not as big a showcase of rugby as we would have hoped for it to be. We got awful weather in the Wales-Scotland game,
which we were fearful of in our preview, and it did come to pass that it was just the wind was making everything untenable. The hookers couldn't throw a line out straight. The whole game, in the first half, they were getting called for it, and then the ref just kind of stopped calling it, even though they kept throwing it crooked in the second half.
There was barely a straight throw all game, but it was affected in all other ways. There was not a lot of attacking rugby going on from either side. Obviously, Scotland lost both of their 10s and had Hogg at 10 by the end of it, and we're just edging the forward battle. And Wales, by contrast, were just sort of kicking the leather off the ball anyway, which has been sort of
really didn't bring a lot to the game of Wales. It was more of a concerning game for Wales. Obviously, it was a big win for Scotland.
First time since 2002
that they'd won in Wales, which is bizarre. But fair play. They were definitely good value for it. Their forwards are looking very, very well polished. Their set pieces looking very polished, and Wales just kind of figured that if they kicked the ball off, like Scotland would maybe cough up a try cheaply to them. It seemed like
they did a lot of kicking at the World Cup, but they brought a defensive intensity that they haven't been bringing in this tournament. It was just a mix of that and not a lot of shots fired from a Welsh point of view, and then the Scots ended up, without playing particularly well themselves, meandering to a 14-10 win, getting a crucial score which saw them home. That was sort of not the best spectacle given the weather, and what followed then between England and Italy was a bizarre game where England, they were obviously comfortably superior to Italy, who are levels beneath just about every team in this competition.
Men boys in the context.
The England's, I've never seen them kick the ball so much. I think they broke records the amount they kicked. They kicked everything. Every time they had any ball, they just kicked it. And eventually, there was dam breaks and they took some scores, but for the most part, against a side that doesn't like defending, it was bizarre seeing them kick the ball so much. And they kicked the leather off the thing.
They were very willful. It must have been a tactic they had worked out, but they didn't. As we were citing before, you just need to go through 3 or 4 phases and an Italian will fall off a tackle.
Not only that, they did that early in the game. They ran through I think 4 or 5 phases and then found a gap and scored instantly and never went back to it. It was bizarre. That was Ben Young's 100-cap try. But they ended up winning the game. Italy, no match for them, but it was a curiosity, and what they ended up doing was giving a conceivable path for both Ireland and France.
At one point, certainly from an Irish selfish point of view, I think it was 8 points. Which was bizarre. Would have thought it would have been out of sight more so, and it could have been if they'd kind of attacked more.
And so France, even as we'll get onto, it ended up being more likely at times that France would do it than Ireland. They had to win by 31, which again, perhaps closer than it should have been, but
it proved grand anyway. England were content to kick the leather off the ball against Italy, and it was still good enough to secure the championship. The France game then, the week or the after the showpiece event of it was also it was
definitely the best game.
It was the best game.
Our perspective on it is completely coloured by the fact that we were so frustrated with Ireland watching the game, and we'd obviously both called Ireland wins. And we did
with the heart.
We did so on the basis of France being vulnerable at times, and they were, but they were comfortably a better team than Ireland. And to be honest with you, perhaps should have put the pedal to the metal and really chased that 31-point target.
I thought Ireland were there for the taking a lot of it.
Their movement was so much crisper, and just from a neutral point of view, you watch one side with the ball and they're just quick and sharp and energized and brilliant at passing and linking up and always hunting tries. and you have another side who are just bludgeoning and slow and turgid and
Even
barely
even
able to
try
move the ball.
The try that Cian Healy did score on his 100th cap was like a big bludgeoning pick and jam Exeter impression.
Like, we kicked the ball in behind through Sexton, and what people say should have been a penalty try. Probably should have been a penalty try.
I think it probably should have been.
For batting the ball out of play. But the penalty try didn't get given, and they had a man down. And it took
struggle that ensued.
It took Ireland the full sin bin period that came from that penalty to actually score and register the try. And when they needed to win by a score or needed 4 tries,
it seemed they took that to heart. Certainly Sexton cited it in a post-match interview. He was like, "Oh, we should have had it." And it's like, you can't be whinging like that. Just go get another try. Why are tries so hard to come by?
Yeah, indeed, and France sort of showed them up in that regard and ran in some beautiful scores. I mean, Ireland at times out of ideas, loose kicking, but there was some beautiful counter-attacking play from the French. Thought Boutier linking up with Vakatawa, linking up with Gael Ficou was brilliant.
Ficou's try was excellently taken. He really made a mug of porter out in the wide channel.
And Entomac's try from the kick return, not the one he did with the chip and chase, but the one from Sexton's loose kick. That was a brilliant score as well. DuPont linking up as well. And then Roman Entomac, who put under a bit of pressure and doing that little chip and chase to kill the game was absolutely delightful as well. And he's a guy I've been sceptical of at times, and I thought he had an excellent game, really polished. So they play a lovely flowy brand of the game. There were times when they themselves looked vulnerable, when Ireland ever got like a few phases together. Their discipline, France's discipline at times was not great, and at times also their defence was letting them down. They're definitely not the complete package, but what they are is a much crisper, much sharper, much better attacking team than Ireland, and that showed home. And they didn't want to chase the 31-point target, which I totally get. In their minds, they're building a much longer term project, and they also had the memory of losing to Ireland, not just the last time out in Paris, but they'd only beaten them once since 2011. And they had to put that right, and they put it right convincingly.
They did. They were comprehensively better. Possibly should have won by more. It was a disappointing way to end from an Irish point of view in that context, but couldn't argue with the results. The better team won on the day, without doubt. And then also on balance on the macro scale, the better team won the Six Nations.
The Six Nations table reads fairly. And in the end, England absolutely the best team in Europe. They were caught cold by France, and fair play to France. But France's not being the full package was shown up by Scotland,
and England managed to get that losing bonus point in that game, which proved pivotal.
Which did France just make an error on the clock that ended up costing them dear. That's perhaps an example of the loose thinking that can sometimes do them in. But they're only building from an England point of view to kick on from a World Cup final. Disappointment, but also success in another way of looking at it. They're still one of the top teams in the world. They beat the All Blacks, and they're flexing their muscles a little bit in this competition after that initial disappointment. I mean, a complete dismantling of Ireland and Wales. I know Wales sort of closed up the score towards the end of that game, but England comfortably superior. I think there are a lot of things. There was a bizarre performance against Italy, but they are the best coached, certainly on offense, the best coached team in Europe by far, the best passing team in Europe, the best skill set, and the most physical.
It's a potent combination. They know where the try line is as well a lot of the time.
They got like Johnny May on the wings, absolute killers, brilliant attacking kicks, the distributions of Farrell and Slade, nice tempo from Ben Youngs, and then a bludgeoning pack that's only getting more bludgeoning as you add Harry Williams and Johnny Hill from Exeter to it.
Johnny Hill's a huge sight. He towers over a Toji, and a Toji's a monster.
I know. It's absolutely scary stuff. And England, they are absolutely flexing their muscles and getting things more and more right as the seasons go on, and they have a wealth of options to choose from and more talent coming through. So they're a scary proposition going forward for anyone in Europe,
for sure.
They have their would-be favourites going into what we're about to talk about, the Nations Cup, and favourites perhaps for next year's tournament as well.
I think so.
Congratulations to them. I think on balance, thoroughly deserved win.
Thoroughly so. And with that, we will park the Six Nations finally here in November, as we can move on from the Six Nations to the Autumn Nations Cup, which is, I'm excited for this now, I have to say. This is a brand new tournament, obviously designed to fill in this COVID time. We're forcing their hand. No one's coming up touring, obviously. It's kind of changed the thing. But I think what they've landed on is what kind of close to what we were calling for in terms of this not a Nations League with 12 teams and a convoluted system that includes the Six Nations and Rugby Championship and tours as a thing.
Yeah.
No, just the problem is that the autumn window is sometimes a little stale and lacking for consequence. And certainly, if you were to look at Springbok performances or Argentinian performances in autumn over the last few years, you'll see exactly why they're kind of hard pressed to call them test matches.
Yeah, the critique of friendlies has been thrown at them, and yet sometimes you have magnificent games, where both teams are really going at it, and sometimes you have guys where you have games where teams are flat and teams are sending experimental sides. So absolutely, having a trophy at the end of the autumn series is something we wanted, something we were vaguely calling for, and I like that it now has a name, the Autumn Nations Cup.
Yes.
I hope that this isn't the last we see of it, that it's not. It is in essence a COVID solution this year. You don't have any Southern Hemisphere teams in it. Well, minus Fiji, but you have Fiji and Georgia coming into basically a Six Nations. But as it is, having like little groups of 4 with each team playing each other, there's absolute scope for a competition. What we were calling for was a competition with lots of,
tiers.
with tiers, where you have, the top 4 teams initially based on world ranking, and then 4 to 8, and then 5 to 8, and then 9 to 12 in the world
and
rankings.
And even down further than that.
Yeah, even
keep going.
Keep going as far as
you can have promotion relegation and have that be ongoing, because they're dragging your feet on promotion relegation in the Six Nations. They don't want to do that, so that's fine. But you can have an independent tournament in this autumn window that's not going to diminish the World Cup. It's not going to diminish the Rugby Championship. Not going to diminish Six Nations. It's going to operate on its own steam and own merit.
And now it has a name, the Autumn Nations Cup. And they should 100%, because you can keep the tours in the June windows or the July windows it now is, and get this tournament in the autumn. So I hope it's not the last we see of it. In terms of the format of the tournament itself, obviously there's 4 games every weekend. That's exciting. We're going to look at the 4 games momentarily, individually. But the 8 teams competing. There's 2 different pools. One including, as the top tier here, Ireland, England, Wales, and Georgia.
Lucky Georgia.
Lucky Georgia. And lucky is one word for it. The initial draw had Fiji in with them and Japan in the other group, and then they decided when Georgia were coming in just to put Georgia in there.
Georgia are not allowed win games, especially if Italy are playing, because you know.
Well, Georgia, Italy would be a better game. The other pool is all kinds of more open in France, Scotland, Fiji, and Italy. And those teams are going to be playing each other, and then there'll be a corresponding game in the final week between first and second and third and fourth and fourth.
Kind of like a mirror version of what they do in the sevens, where you can have your plate, your bowl, your shield, all of that stuff, and it's good. It's competitive fixtures. It adds a bit of intrigue and a bit of value to this window. And it's a great opportunity for some of these teams. Certainly for Georgia, I know they'll be coming in a little understocked and under kind of undergunned, because they haven't had much contact training, or they weren't allowed to do a test match at all to get themselves warmed up. But just a chance for them to face the tier 1 sides. That's all they're asking for. They'll be delighted. They'll be pulling for it. And then similarly, Fiji, in a similar capacity, them getting test matches. The last time out in France, they won. So they'll be bullish.
Oh no, this is a massive opportunity for Fiji, more so than Georgia. They're in a better position. Obviously, they have some players playing in Europe. Vern Cotter is in charge, very smart coach, perhaps a coach as well placed as any to kick on from the John McKee side and actually go take it to another level. They've all the talent in the world. He's marrying some classic world class players from Europe with some young guys from Fiji. Excited to see what kind of teams he puts together and what kind of performances they put together. But there's no question that this is a massive opportunity for them, and it's something that they'll be gunning for. They'll be absolutely looking to take some scalps and establish themselves. They're very close to being, an effective tier 1 side. They've been to World Cup quarterfinal.
They have,
and they have some world class talent with Radradra coming in as captain, one of the best players in the world. There's definitely scope for Fiji to do some fun things this tournament. From the point of view of the tier 1 teams, it's not obviously as serious as the Six Nations. You would expect to see some chopping and changing. Like if you're in England, maybe you're in a nice even keeled position. You're looking to bolster your squad. Obviously France have this Eleanor rule, which is going to mean that they have to run the changes and get some young guys in. That's going to be interesting as well. And then if you're in Ireland or Wales,
you're kind of rebuilding.
You're trying to rebuild and find yourself an identity in a new team.
We're still beginning of the new World Cup cycle. It's a new tournament. You can feel free to rotate things in and out. Like you're trying to establish playing patterns. Obviously, It'd be nice to win the thing. Every team will have a mind to try and go and win the thing. But,
another trophy, please.
Yeah, absolutely. But failing that, it is a chance to just test new combinations and try and play with a different style than you would normally see when you're kind of constrained by the Six Nations and all the pressure that comes therein. So excited to see what all these teams look like in this brand new tournament, and I hope we make for some good spectacles.
Yeah, as far as favourites are concerned, obviously I make England favourites.
Yeah, firm favourites.
Best team in it, most balanced, most settled, most mature.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they'd be there, but definitely the likes of in that second pool, Scotland, I think Scotland, Fiji, and France
are all
will be looking at topping that pool and then having a crack at England in the final.
That's exactly it. Yeah, so you'd nearly make them second favourites, considering it's going to come from either pool.
Absolutely,
so
and I think Ireland perhaps more so than Wales. Obviously
just
have a bone to pick with England themselves, and will be desperate to find some momentum off the back of that absolute shit show against France.
That's true. But Wales are kind of backs to the wall themselves and will be gunning to try and find some results first.
I think they're settling for anything now.
As well as some kind of good performances to kind of lean back on. But there's a lot at stake for each of these teams, even if
it's a huge positivity. It's a huge positive. It's something that I'm desperately hoping succeeds and generates some eyeballs.
Yes.
And I don't want to see the back of it. I don't want to be the last time I see the Autumn Nations Cup. I would love to see something like this with the Southern Hemisphere teams involved. Ideally with the rankings solution that we talked about, still the 3-test window, doesn't interfere with club rugby, doesn't necessitate the inclusion of a global calendar that's never going to work. I definitely think, I really hope that's not the last time we see the
format is dead on. The only caveat to your eyeballs comment is the fact that it's been broadcast on Amazon Prime for whatever
that's only
reason.
In the UK, but it is definitely a factor. Amazon Prime entering the broadcast game, which is just a shame in that
you need fewer paywalls, not more.
Well, you just it's another broadcaster that is behind a paywall that's also taking it in, and it's another layer between the casual viewer and the games. The games that are on free to air always do better.
Yeah,
and you do want to get the casual eyeball on this, and that's where things like good highlights packages and that
all
things,
of that, I'll start to forgive Amazon if they're putting out good highlights packages on YouTube.
Just let's get people involved.
That they will.
I'm hopeful. Yeah, let's see obviously what they do with it. But as it is, they're behind a subscription service now. Hopefully within I don't know because I don't have Amazon Prime, but in the context of people who do, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, for deliveries and everything else. Hopefully they're promoting it strongly within that.
Would like to think that,
and getting some fresh eyeballs in the game that way. But definitely, another subscription service entering the game as far as rugby's concerned doesn't bode too well for the casual fan.
No, we're not generally in favour of it. We'll be watching it on Premier Sports here, which is mercifully airing it to us, which is very we'll be grateful for. But with that, we're just looking forward to a great tournament for it, and excited to see what comes. Autumn Nations Cup, here we come. And we're going to start off with the first test, which is on this Friday, which features our vested interest indeed. We have Ireland v Wales.
Absolutely.
Which is always a humdinger of a game. It's going to be taking place at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. And it's 7 p.m. kickoff on Friday evening, and it's going to be reffed by Mathieu Renal, a Frenchman. And it's set to be a pretty wet one. It's wet.
Yeah,
certainly,
we have a window right there, and I can tell you it's wet out there
right now. Apparently, that's meant to pass for today, but then a bit later in the week there'll be a bit more wet. So it's just kind of. It's kind of November,
It's pretty November out there.
It's pretty November out there, all things considered.
100%.
So it might be November again on Saturday or on Friday evening.
There's sometimes, over the years, we always went to the, obviously not able to at the moment, but we always went to the Leinster and Ireland games, and somehow the Aviva Stadium and the RDS where Leinster play always managed to have an avoidance of the bad weather.
Yeah, so you have a nice clear night sometimes.
2 hours of clear skies and no rain on the weekend, and they would be for the rugby match. So let's hope that trend continues. I'm going to hope that it's maybe a little wet, maybe a little breezy, but it's not actually lashing rain.
One thing that's probably we can say with a certainty is that regardless of the rain coming from the sky, it'll probably be slippy. All the grass around here is just holding moisture. There's no chance to dry.
You go out and you kick a rugby ball and you drop it once and it's soaked.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
what happens at the moment.
So it will be slippy. That much we know. But that's nothing these two teams won't be used to and will be game for.
It'll absolutely inform the tactics, though.
It will. There might be a bit of leather on that ball to be kicked off over the course of the 80 minutes.
I dare say you're right. Yeah. Oh yeah, this will be one for the. Do they say one for the purists? I don't know. One for the tennis fans.
Yeah, one for the football fans. Yeah, to keep tennis coming up. Now we're going to do a slightly different preview from what our normal format is. We're just going to look, because it's the beginning of the tournament. We're going to look at all the teams individually and just what they're kind of hoping to get, not just from this fixture, but also from the tournament as a whole. Yeah. So we're going to start with the home team here, which is Ireland. This is us. What are we hoping to get from the tournament? Well, yeah, see, I hope we're just looking to kind of rediscover a bit of mojo and a bit of confidence, I guess, in the game plan and in what we're doing. Because currently, even like going to France and talk, and they wanted to, like last week or 2 weeks ago, they wanted to go over there and they didn't want to mention that they had to go for a bonus point. Do they even remember how to go for bonus points? We're a bit clunky as a team. They didn't play at
for my money, they're a team that's struggling with an identity crisis at the moment, and like that was not helped by the presence of Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton at halfback. Murray's still on the bench and Sexton's still starting, so that's by no means changed. But there's this situation where there's a lot of fresh faces across the park. There's a lot of more dynamic players. I mean, the pack that they've selected for this game is extremely dynamic. You know, they've got Caelan Daragh in at number 8. He's not physical, but he's more mobile and less bulky.
Yeah, footwork driven and handling. Like
exactly. It's more about footwork and speed, his game. Likewise, you would say Josh van der Fleer. Even Peter O'Mahony is showing some good wheel at the moment. You know, James Ryan in the second row is a nippy guy himself. Ronan Kelleher at hooker. These like quick players, not particularly not physical as with the rest of them. Physical enough, but bulk isn't what their game is about. Slow passes around the fringes aren't going to get the best out of them. What's going to get the best out of them is moving them a little bit wider, getting them on the ball at speed. They can move at speed, they can operate at speed, and getting some front foot ball that way. And then you just juxtapose that with sort of a very stale halfback and midfield combination that isn't looking to move the ball particularly well.
No.
And there's just this almost schizophrenic element to the team where they're trying some things. They've brought in this new sort of shape, where they have more forward pods moved wider. They have guys in the wings. And against Italy, you can see it sort of work. Some pretty combinations. Anything can work against Italy.
Yeah.
But you can see it. You can see the mindset behind it against Italy. But then against France, all of a sudden you're not winning collisions. All of a sudden there's a bit more pressure, and everything tightens up again. And all of that seemingly goes out the window, and you're right back to short carry off nine, kick in the air.
Yes, there's a prevailing problem that I've often said about Ireland is like the notion that a ruck is safer than a pass is just wrong. And they were in 2018, they were the 30-40 plus phase team. They loved a ruck. They loved running support lines, not to receive offloads but to resource rucks. And it's like, a ruck isn't safe. It's not
especially
safety,
in this game where that Ireland team in 2018 would be penalised off the field if they were to play right now, given the
ceiling rule,
tightening of rules around the ruck area.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not the most clever way to utilise your weapons. And I think you're right in saying the personnel that they have, and certainly the personnel they've selected, would suggest that they're going to try and move the ball.
Especially up front. Like I still am juxtaposing. I love seeing, we've got Gibson Park in making his debut
first start, as we have James Lowe in to make his first start on the wing as well.
Absolutely. So getting those wingers involved would be crucial. Although it's a curiosity seeing Andrew Conway out of there.
Oh yeah, no. As I was saying, remember in the last game in Paris when you were watching Jacob Stockdale inexplicably drop a load of balls and you were just thinking, God, we really need to get Conway out of there. That's obviously what's going on here.
Poor Conway is brilliant and has been starved of possession. He does not need to be out of there permanently. So to see him dropped from the 23 was definitely jarring. He's a great finisher. But seeing Lowe come in is definitely a positive. Hugo Keenan's had good steps starting off, and we know Stockdale can be lethal at times.
The issue with Stockdale is he's an out-and-out left winger. And James Lowe's an out-and-out left winger, and the better left winger at the moment is James Lowe. Yeah, so the better combination is probably Conway, Lowe, and Keenan at fullback.
Yeah, that certainly would be my thought. But they're persisting with him at fullback, and I'd be curious to see just what they can get going on offense. It's really that through line of Sexton, Henshaw and Chris Farrell in the centres, who are going to need to show more than they have in terms of moving the ball around. But yeah, obviously,
certainly, I think Gibson Park will help with that. He tends to throw flatter passes to the line. He will operate with more speed. I was excited to see Gibson Park in. I am still befuddled and confused by the lack of Marmion, who to my mind is actually the form scrummy in the country at the moment. Connacht moved the ball very impressively despite having no tight forwards to back it up a lot of the time. But yeah, no, his absence is a bit jarring. But having Gibson Park in there will generate that bit more tempo. The question and the fear is that we're a bit too slow to keep up with him, which would be a very clunky, disappointing look if he's throwing passes too quickly.
You'd hate to see that from the forward pack that's been picked as well. Like, you'd expect better of them, in honesty. They should, like, you like to think that we can keep up with that and that we can move the ball a little quicker. The fear I would have, and something that just has to be worked on, is that actually, like, if you assess it, and it's one of the things that if you're sitting back as a casual fan, when it's the experience we always get when Six Nations happening, talking to friends who aren't really into rugby, who are watching Six Nations games, and they're like, gee, I don't know, man, I'm just looking at this France team and they look really pretty and they can move the ball, and then we have it and we can't really do anything. And that's the fear, is like, we're actually kind of probably the worst passing team in Europe on balance at the moment.
I would agree.
And that's just a skills thing that has to be worked on, and perhaps a personnel thing too, but like,
well, it might take suffering a few defeats or things to learn that lesson. But the fear, like, I have a fear about this test, to be honest, because I think Wales are due for a win, and whenever we go in as firm favourites against Wales, the Wales tend to do us. We have that kind of relationship with them.
We do.
And if we are trying to throw the ball around and work on our passing game and all that, this Wales team have airs of Scarlets about them. They're probably better at that game. Like, they could win in a shootout in Dublin.
Exactly, and like, listen, the weather, it's all weather permitting, but there's a couple of things I'd love to see from Ireland in this game. There's probably two things: getting the ball wider, using the full width of the pitch, and being disciplined about doing that.
If James Lowe spends the whole debut chasing box kicks, I'll be
livid. That was my second thing, is that the kicks into the sky against a team with Liam Williams in it are a no-go, especially with the inexperienced wingers we have on the field. I mean, I don't know how many bombs we think we're going to win, and it's something that needs to be impressed in the head of Sexton as well. First of all, you've got Gibson Park, who's a passing scrum half on debut, does not need to be put under the pressure of launching balls into the sky with accuracy. It's not his game, shouldn't ask it of him. Likewise, Sexton, you're not playing with Rob Kearney anymore. Like, who are these bombs for? You know, I don't know. Like, he can't stick a bomb in the air and ask, James Lowe to chase and win it. It's not Lowe's game. And it is Lee Halfpenny's game. It is Liam Williams' game. It is even Josh Adams' game. Those guys will eat that shit up.
They will.
All day long, and they'll run it back. And that is, like, so from an Ireland point of view, be smarter with your kicks. Get them low. Get the Welsh team coming up. Wales, are going to be responding to a difficult time defensively. They've lost their defence coach. They're going to be, chances are they're going to be bullishly trying to shut everything Ireland down, making statements on defence, which we know they're capable of. And we also know that the solution to that is attacking kicks, getting little attacking kicks in behind,
little low ones,
and then getting the wingers to come up and kicking the ball behind them.
Welsh wingers do have an instinct for just kind of joining the line. They do tend to creep. So, like, your classic Ronan O'Gara spiral, the 50-22, as you saw in Super Rugby AU, like that kind of approach, going for grass and going for touch, try and play that territory game, especially if it is wet. Like, a box kick is not your only exit, lads. Like, you can spin it wide. James Lowe is a useful exit. If you can just put the seat, like the 4 passes required to reach him, he has a very useful left boot that you can use to execute off exit, or you can run it out with him. He's very exciting.
Likewise, Stockdale has a fine left peg on him as well. So absolutely, both of those are options. And as far as defence is concerned, Wales' primary threats, you're looking at Josh Adams and Liam Williams.
Even Watkin and Jay Davison in the centres are potentially dynamic. If they can get some go forward, if they can run at a fractured line, they'll execute a lot.
Well, there's a couple of areas in defence that are going to be huge. Obviously, I think just stopping them at source is vital, and I think Ireland will be confident they can do that with the heft of Ryan and Henderson in the second row.
The one caveat I would attach is that Alan Wynne-Jones is a nuisance, and he is the wisest of the second rows on it. And the last time we saw him up against that combination of Ryan Henderson, he kind of schooled them a little at line out time.
Is that right? Because we beat them in the Six Nations.
We did beat them in the Six Nations. But I don't think Henderson was playing that.
Oh, okay.
But the year prior, I mean, World Cup year, when we were just trying to establish that partnership. They kind of were taken to school a little by the savvy plays of Alan Wynne-Jones, and they're not the first, they won't be the last. The man is phenomenal, but you just got to be ready for that. Wales are an absolute nuisance at the breakdown. The onus is on Ireland to try to
resource that area, but from a defensive point of view, just stopping Wales at source and putting Biggar under pressure is going to be massive, and using those guys heft, I think they will fancy doing that. And then likewise the jackal threat of Peter O'Mahony and Caelan Darragh getting any loose guys and attacking the pill is going to be massive as well. What is interesting about Ireland against Wales is like we have two shooting centres, Henshaw and Farrell, who are great readers of the defence and
good tacklers too.
Good tacklers and dominant defenders. They don't play like Gary Ringrose is much more of a soak tackler and much less comfortable exposing himself out there, whereas those guys will rush out and expose themselves but try to shut down plays, which will leave themselves open to either a Finn Russell pass from Biggar or little chips in behind, and that's why what I would love to see with Murray leaving the team is just deviate a little bit from that that 13-man line that we've had with the 9 defending on the wing, and move Gibson Park in behind as a sweeper, blocking the kicks and helping out Stockdale.
Because the other thing is that whatever about the 9 covering the chips, like that 13-man line was only viable when you had Rob Kearney at fullback, who can actually read where the kicks are going. You actually do need that pendulum. The tradition of the pendulum is there for a reason. Like it's the only real way to effectively cover the backfield, especially in the middle third. Unless you have a near clairvoyant fullback with so much experience that he can read what the 10's going to do and anticipate where the ball's going, so you can trust him to cover that much space.
You need 2 men back, and you need someone covering the chip to allow the 2 centres to pull forward, and that's what Ireland need. Absolutely, the big step up is going to be, because Wales, I don't think they're going to try and reinvent the wheel, especially if it's a wet night in Dublin.
No,
they're going to try and expose what they'll think is their best matchups on the pitch, which is the aerial bombs from Biggar, and getting the likes of Liam Williams matched up against young Keenan
or Stockdale.
Stockdale, who's on about a 50% drop rate when it comes to balls down his channel. So I mean, that's scary. The guy's out of form and out of confidence, and they've put trust in him at fullback again. I would love to see him step up and make plays and shut that down, but that's absolutely going to be an area that Wales target, so it's something that Ireland should be aware of
for sure. And then I suppose is there anything else from an Irish point of view? I think we can move on to Wales as well, who are really suffering a World Cup hangover this season. It's like new coach syndrome in the worst possible way. Their records
it's been rubbish, but also kind of predictable. I mean, it's one of those things where it doesn't matter how much you predicted, it's still traumatizing to see it happen. Everybody knew Trump was going to be in the lead in the election in midweek, and everyone's still freaked out about it. It's just one of those things. Everyone knew Wales were going to struggle post Gatland, whoever they got in, and they started struggling, and everyone's panicking. That said, Pivac, the guy who's thrown under the bus is defence coach Byron Hayward, who, to be fair,
their defence was leaking tries. So, and considering how robust their defence had been in the World Cup, it was what built their success. Is what got them to the semi-final. It's what very nearly got them to the final as well against the Springboks.
That's who has the final say on the team? Is it not Wayne Pivac?
It is Wayne Pivac.
And Wayne Pivac, he's fired his defensive coach. What he did in the Six Nations was throw a kid who had played a few matches for Saracens straight into the 13 shirt at test level. And he's a good attacker, but he's not that good a tackler. And he missed tackles that cost them tries against Ireland and England. And now the defence coach is fired.
Hugh Jones sometimes out there. He was a little soft, and it was especially it was kind of they're kind of trying to reinvent themselves as well. Pivac's Scarlets were a very ambitious, very attacking side, and you can see elements of that in how they play. Certainly in the way they went to play France a few weeks back as well. They went out there to try and take them on in Paris in a shootout, and they lost the shootout, but they scored some good tries themselves. They can be dangerous, which is what makes me think they could be dangerous for Ireland as well. If Ireland are going to try and move the ball at all, I think Wales might be a little better at that, but some of that defensive softness is still there. So the defence coach obviously not completely absolved from blame, but to be scapegoated with all the blame seems a bit dubious. As well,
if the metric is it's not working after 11 months, so you're fired, why is Wayne Pivac still in the job?
Yeah.
That's the concern you'd have over that, throwing a guy under the bus like that. But as it is, he's done it. He's still in the job, and now his back is to the wall as far as this tournament is concerned. Like if you're talking about hefty defeats against Ireland and England, or even comfortable defeats against Ireland and England, and a win against Georgia notwithstanding, that is what it is. And then, you know, is it a make or break game against whoever it would be? On paper, you might say Fiji, but you know, it could be Scotland or France either.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's very tough. Certainly, it's backs to the wall. Like it's a long time since Wales have had a run of form this poor. Yeah. Even in some of their wooden spoon, like they used to be a Grand Slam wooden spoon year on year kind of thing. It was all pre-Gatland, and it's like it hasn't been that way for a while. So this is tough to look at if you're a Welsh fan for sure. Some of this year, it is a World Cup hangover, but you can only caveat it so much when you keep losing games, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe like it's certainly pressure on for them. That being said, there's some chains of optimism. I'm excited about Rowlands. I think he was brilliant for Wasps.
Yeah.
Thought he did come in. He had a few errors in the game against Scotland, like all of them. But
he's only warming to the task. Yeah. He definitely, like, one of the areas that you would have cited was a lack of real heft in that tight five.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas Francis coming in at tight head and Rowlands coming in the lock. That absolutely is
kind
huge.
of remedies that straight away.
It pretty much does.
Yeah.
And like if they were a rugby team and you were looking to get signings in, those would be the two signings you'd make if they were a club team, I should say.
Yeah.
And that's like that they brought them in. Their Welsh players is great. It's great. So I think that's an area that could be fixed. You know, they've got Tipper coming back in. And on paper, the side is very tidy. You know, you got Falatau at 8, Tipperick at 7.
Liam Williams back in now.
Alan Jones there. Liam Williams on the wing. Jonathan Davis back, motoring from 13.
Indeed.
Owen Watkin, more solidity at 12. Dan Biggar had a bit of a shocker against Scotland, and a bit like his opposite number, Johnny Sexton, is becoming more and more hot and cold as he gets on. But when he's hot, he's very hot.
It's true. And a bit like in terms of both of those dynamics, like maybe their form has dipped a little. They're a little older. There's question marks as to whether they're the actual 10 who'll take them to the next World Cup, both in the case of Biggar and Sexton.
Yeah.
But in both cases, no one's taken the jersey off them yet. They're still the best 10s in their respective countries.
Gareth Anscombe is seemingly permanently injured, and Reece Patchell hasn't really quite got to the level yet.
And Callum Sheedy is untested, although he is on the bench for this week, so we will get to see Callum Sheedy, who looks excited. Like certainly Bristol know how to move the ball, so he will be no mug in their attacking thing, but it'll be exciting to see him come in. But in the meantime, Biggar is very much the guy that they've trusted for a while, and it's a tough ask going to Dublin as always, especially with their backs to the wall in terms of this form. Yeah. But certainly, like the likes of Tipperick back in, big guys. They have some talisman in that team.
It's just about finding some form and finding some performances, and generally speaking, over the years, nothing has quite lit a fire under their bellies, perhaps at times, especially when they feel like it's unjustified, like than an Irish team. Like they've tended to know how to handle Irish teams. That's a better way of putting it. Mm-hmm. And this team is a handleable team, as the France game showed. This Ireland team, like there's vulnerabilities there, and there's also as bad as Wales' confidence is, there's a brittle confidence in that Ireland team. Like they're trying something new. And the second it stops working, they go right back to the old ways, and they start kicking the ball in the air, and that's your model. Mm-hmm. Like I think taking those aerial bombs and responding and winning those battles decisively is actually the key to how they win this game, and standing up front. Yeah.
Well, first knock us back in a few of the contacts, force the loose kick, and then execute on kick return. Very, very if you can even get a kick return back to within 5 yards of where it was kicked from, that's just such a deflating thing for any box kicking side when it's just run right back at them with interest.
100%.
So Wales will be looking to do that, create those turnovers from us.
Yeah, but the first port of call is just shooting up out of the line, and shutting Ireland down. Mm-hmm. And making sure that they can't really generate that momentum. And I think another area that's going to be absolutely vital to doing that is isolating runners. Like if Ireland are a little slow to find their shape and they have guys taking the contact by themselves, like you could just picture Caelan Darras breaking a tackle, getting through, getting grounded, and then an Irish support runner is not quite there, and Justin Tipperick is and that is,
or
that
Alan
is,
Wynne Jones, or literally any of them to a man will make a mess of any breakdown.
And stealing those balls and getting on top of the Irish and making them compress and reform that old system,
and also just bringing the line speed out to win, because Ireland, much to our chagrin, still persist with only distributing off 9 and 10, and the centres are a bit bludgeoning. So if you can if you can force them narrow.
The other thing is that they're trying to go wide, Ireland. They're consciously trying to move the ball wide, and as we pointed out, they're not great passers of football. So putting the likes of like Henshaw under pressure when he knows what he should do is throw a skip pass. There's absolute scope for success there from a Wales point of view. So I really do think they should be bullish about this game. I think they should be going into this fancying it, because Ireland are very much in a period of transition and have looked pretty unconvincing. Most of their players are struggling for form, just like the Wales players. And if they have the right plan and they execute it well, they have the ability, they know they have the ability to own the breakdowns, to own the high balls, to frustrate them for 80 minutes and to get on top of them and score some tries and win the game.
Potentially true, yeah.
Like that back three is so vulnerable. Stockdale and Keenan and Lowe, they're all young, they're all debutants. Like Stockdale is brand new as a fullback and is in total form. Lowe's brand new to Test rugby, and so too is Hugo Keenan.
Yeah, 20.
That's like, when you consider that it's Josh Adams and Lee Halfpenny and Liam Williams on the other end of the scale, like that's got to be an area they attack
for sure. Yeah, and if it's a rainy day, as we suspect it might be, that could all lead to Wales getting inroads in it. As far as predictions for the game, then, what are you going to say? Are you going to?
I predicted Ireland to win the last time and they didn't, and I felt stupid.
So you're going to vote with your head this time?
I don't know. I'd say pretty. I don't know. I don't want to get too down either, but I don't know. Yeah,
we do get down sometimes watching this Ireland team.
Yeah, there's optimism. Like when we were talking about Ireland, there's optimism that they can move the ball quick, they can be dynamic. Gibson Park is going to be vital.
Yes.
Can they put it all together? Yes, they can. Are Wales a bit soft this year? Yes, they are. So yeah, okay, I'll say Ireland then.
I'm going to vote with Ireland. I always vote with my head when it comes to Ireland.
Your heart, you mean? Yeah.
My heart even, sorry. Yeah. Yes, I ignore my head. I tell it to shut up. Stop telling me we're going to lose. My heart says we're going to win.
How's that working out?
Oh, sometimes it's great. Others not so much. Certainly we haven't...
You called us to beat the All Blacks?
I've called us to win the last 2 World Cups, because I keep saying we're going to win the World Cup. It's law of attraction stuff, you need to put it out there and hopefully it'll happen.
The law of attraction has taken an absolute hammering then at your hand.
Indeed, yeah, it doesn't work.
No. Yeah, listen, hopefully Ireland will win, but absolutely the scope is there for Wales to win it. If Ireland win by 10 to 15 points, that's a very good day for them, regardless of how they look, even though I think their primary focus does need to be how they look.
Yes. Well, my worst fear for the game is that we do try and get into a shootout, try and move it wide, lose that shootout, and then in the games to come revert to type and go backwards rather than
there's
forwards.
The other one as well, which has happened even in this Six Nations, where we win with the old bludgeoning technique, and then get a positive sense of confidence about it, but it's hard to know.
Well, it's
I'd say home advantage, Ireland edges. That's what I'll say. 5 points.
I'll say 10. Let's be bullish about it. We're gonna beat the soft Wales team.
We'll see. Yeah. What a dangerous thing to say.
I know.
Like, way to learn your lessons about all those times Wales have beaten us.
I know. Yeah. But with that, we'll move on to the next fixture, which is coming up on Saturday, the 14th of November. We have Italy-Scotland, 12:45 kickoff, which is quite early for a test match.
Yeah, 1:45 local.
Obviously a little later, a little more reasonable at the a new stadium in Florence, no less. Stadio Artemio Franchi, or Franchi, I'd say probably.
Franchi maybe, yeah.
Franchi maybe.
I don't know.
But yeah, class to see a new stadium, new locale.
Fiorentina's ground in Serie A in soccer.
There you go.
So there you
Moving incrementally southwards throughout Italy. It's not south,
but
it's more southern than
exactly
than Benetton and the
from the leg and boot. We've got all the way to sort of the upper thigh.
Yeah, just about where the zip starts when you're zipping down the boot.
No, it's like it's still the north of Italy, and which is rugby heartland out there.
Yeah.
But 100% excited to see them take it to a new venue. It's just a shame there's no fans there to see it.
That is disappointing.
It's much of a muchness where you play really these days.
True.
What I will say is that the weather is to be perfect. 18 degrees Celsius, no winds to speak of, and clear sunny skies.
Oh, lovely stuff. Luke Pearce reffing, obviously. We'll do the same thing as we had before. Just look ahead at the tournament and what they're hoping to get out of, like what each side is looking to get out of it. Starting with Italy, the hosts, the Azzurri, once again, just a little bit outgunned and outmatched in everything they were doing in the Six Nations. They are just comprehensively the tier 2 side at the tier 1 table, and they're certainly, the last time these two met was in Italy, and it was one of Scotland's most impressive performances. They were comprehensive, they were better.
It was a 17-0 win for Scotland.
Yeah,
it was fine without being spectacular.
I thought it wasn't
without Finn Russell, so it was their forwards doing the job. That was
what I was thinking. It was like just in the context of the World, because it was coming shortly after their World Cup catastrophe, and to see them so comprehensively more physical and more dominant in all the set pieces, and just really Italy were impotent in that game, and that traditionally is the game that they would be targeting in this in the Six Nations. Is the game against home game against Scotland, so they have another chance at it this time, which is not normally they wouldn't be getting a do-over in the same year, but they do have the chance to try and make amends for that being nilled at home by Scotland. Never a fun thing.
Yeah, and so as far as generally what they're trying to do and what they're trying to get out of it, I mean, bringing a physicality that can match their opposition is huge. They have obviously class back rowers who are feisty and can make a dog's dinner of your ball at times, which is definitely a positive. They're trying to move the ball at times. They're not clinical enough.
I'm excited by the shape they've employed. They have extra depth. They are trying to access the wide channels. It's unfortunate that sometimes it's just the passings letting them down, and very often it'll be one of those back rowers who's the link man, he's the second last man, and he gets it when it's already scrappy. It's scrappy ball when it reaches Garbisi, the out half, then he fires a slack enough pass that checks the run of the guy outside, and then he throws the last pass, and it's either Pellegrini or Negri or someone who's meant to catch and give to the winger who's in space, but instead of catching and gives, he catching and taking contact because they're a little off.
Yeah, and there's definitely improvements, even on top of the shoots of growth that you might have been seeing in Conor O'Shea. Or, I mean, the critique that would have been given is they finally developed a run game, but had no kicking game to speak of. You know, they had Tommy Allen, who's a 12 in disguise, playing a 10, and now actually they're 12 as a 10 in disguise, and they have a natural 10. So between Kana and Garbisi, they actually have guys who can kick the ball and play options. A bit of territory.
And you don't need to, like what you're talking about with Ireland, it doesn't need to be a box kick in the air that you're going to kick too far and it's going to be fielded and run back at you and kick return. You can try and mix up your kicking game, try and play the territory game a bit more savvily.
And they've worked some lovely passes and some lovely shapes and got some decent line breaks, and likewise they can be combative enough at the breakdown time. They tend to struggle at scrum time. This is a big task for them this week against Scotland.
Well, their front row is definitely outgunned a lot in the Six Nations and will be again. But to be fair to their second rowers, they are physical and hardy enough as well, and you can see in Benetton as well, even though they don't tend to win many games, they make it scrappy out there. They're actually not a soft team at all. They're quite a gritty, hard team. It's just sometimes an inaccurate one and sometimes an ill-disciplined one, and that's born of the pressure that they're perpetually under by being outmatched in these games, but also inflicting on themselves. Like you were saying, the back row are great, like Pellegrini, Stain, Negri, all fantastic players. It's just they're rarely contributing proactively to games. They're reacting. They're cleaning up all the mess of their own errors and then making around 10 tackles before they get in space and able to run at a defender. And it's just, it would be nice to see a little bit of like those kinks ironed out so that you can get your good players contributing.
I can see all of that. I can see the attack building to nice places. I can see the forward pack building to decent places as well. And I can see the beginnings of a full performance being in there, with the obvious and consistent caveat of one area, which is defence and not mainly just the tackling.
Straight first up tackling.
How can it be this bad after so many years? I mean, it was the same when Campagnaro first came to the squad. It was his glaring weakness. He couldn't tackle. He's since left the squad. Other guys have come in, and just the quality. Some of the first up tackling that the Italians miss is shocking, and like even under pressure, even having soaked a lot of physical contacts, even facing classy attacking players, just some of the softness is like Jaden Hayward against Ireland in that first game
just
back,
softing
just
out.
Not even putting a shoulder into a contact. I mean, it is their number 1, 2 and 3 work on is just succeeding at making dominant hits and tackles against these teams. They'll never ever be able to compete if they so consistently fail to make dominant tackles, and that's to a man. Like, that's not like the back row. Obviously, when the ball comes their way, they can be physical. Bram Stain doesn't miss many tackles. No, but when it gets out wide, when Scottish centres or English centres or any centres are running at their centres, they're missing tackles, and that is something that is unforgivable and needs to be fixed. That is the first thing to fix, and we've said it now going into, I think, 2 or 3 tournaments in a row, like you would have said last year's Six Nations, we would have said job 1, fix your tackling. Going to the World Cup, job 1, fix your tackling. Going to this year's Six Nations, job 1, fix your tackling. And here we are at the Nations Cup, same thing.
Fix your tackling.
They still haven't fixed their tackling.
Like, I have sympathy for the defence coach, because it's like in terms
of... But even that's what you should be working on.
It should be.
No shape work. Tackle.
Shape is like, you don't even know if your shape is effective or not, because before you get a chance to figure it out, or it has a chance to impose anything, someone's missed a tackle, it's broken already, and you just, like, you can't learn anything about a system until you get the basics of the technique right. And just get the tackles down, bring your men down. We're going to hammer that home, because it is the main work on for Italy. But then beyond that, like, if they can build in that area, and if they can divvy that load, if you can trust other people to make the tackles, so that Pellegrini and Negri don't have to spend the game, or Bramstein soaking tackles by the end, making dominant hits in the first half and then soaking yardage in the second, because you're already gassed and you've already worked your socks off trying to mop up these mistakes. If they can get themselves a bit more proactive, I think what they are targeting in the group that they're in is ideally one big win this tournament. Don't know who's against. Could be Scotland this time, but they'll be looking to try and win a game for sure. And then short of that, probably a more realistic goal is just a cohesive performance for at least 70 minutes that has you in a competitive game. Because they haven't done that yet either.
You saw bits of it against England, and that was in a game where England didn't really test their tackling. You saw bits of it. Again, the bits and bobs aren't far away, apart from just that area of tackling. But absolutely, they should be able to manage their way around the field, make things scrappy at the breakdown and at the set piece, attack more crisply and find some tries. And then, if you do all of those pizzas, all those bits and bobs, you're not going to be too far away in the end.
No, for sure. And I will reiterate my point on the 3-pointers, because I still think they're outgunned here. I think no 3-pointers in the first quarter, especially. Certainly if it gets to the last quarter, and if you've managed to succeed in all of these things and scored enough that you're tight, maybe it's 21-24 or something, and you want to level the scoreboard, or you're gassed and you get a penalty that you can kick, do it at that point. But in the first half, that's when your energy's there. That's when you need, before Pellegrini has made 14 tackles, get him on the ball in a meaningful way, dynamically running at these Scottish guys and getting over the line, because realistically you're not going to, with your tackling being such as it is, you're never going to be like holding teams like Scotland to lower than 20 points, so you have to score 20 at least yourself.
And it's one of those things where, like, because we've gotten sort of some pushback, and certainly the common narrative is that any side that doesn't take their 3 ever in any context ever is just stupid, and it's because they're all stupid, and that's why they didn't do it. But I mean, like, the difficulty with that, and I do think I agree with your point that it matters more when your side is significantly outgunned, when you're an underdog side. It's just like when you're presented with the opportunity to take 3 points, it's often stated that it's 3 free points. Our point would be that those points don't come free; they come at a cost. Firstly, of all the momentum of the game being sucked out. There's 3 points on the board and we restart. So there's an awful lot of winning of a game that you have to do if you want to win it by taking 3-pointers. You have to win the restart, you have to get back up the pitch, just to make it a positive play. It's so easy to give back a cheap 3 after you've conceded a 3. More difficult to do that after you've scored a try. Secondly, in terms of what else you're giving up one of the few opportunities that you're going to have to set up a line out, 5 out from the opposition line. And if you know you need to make those opportunities count, or if you're like an Exeter or a side that's really confident from that position, like, this is where we're going to get our tries. We're going to get our tries from mauls close to the line and line outs close to the line, and setting up set pieces like that. Then that has to be considered that this is one of the few areas where you have a real chance to impose your game on the opposition. You get to spend more time down in the opposition half, you're making them make more tackles, and at the end of the day, 7 points is more than 3. And it only needs to work once every 2 times to be a profitable play.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things where you can see why other teams do it. Like, even if you go for it and you don't get it, you're still in the right area of the field.
Yeah, you're still forcing them to exit.
So our perspective on it is, especially if you're the lesser team, being aggressive. Like, scoring a try takes an emotional toll that conceding a 3-pointer doesn't.
Well, like, if you're going into a game against a team that you are the underdogs to, and you're in the first quarter, maybe you catch them a little slow, you've managed to start really well, and you earn yourself a penalty in the 22. like kicking 3 over is just like nothing to the favourites. They're going like, sure, look, the final quarter is ours anyway. We're going to run in 3 tries in the final quarter regardless. This 3 points means nothing. And it does.
That's the way it works out.
It's it's exact. Whereas if you if you go for it, if you start like a house on fire and you catch the better team a little cold in the first quarter, if you can score 12 points or something, or 14 from 2 tries quickly, then you can start kicking like when you get the next penalty, maybe you chip that one over. Because you're in the game, then you've built a lead, and then you can get the scoreboard ticking over. But like the notion of just getting the scoreboard ticking over with a 3-pointer off the bat at the beginning of the game, if Italy that's not a score.
If Italy are dominant against Scotland here for 20 to 25 minutes and they come away from that with a 6-0 lead, chances are it's not going to be enough.
Not enough.
And then Scotland will come into the game and all of a sudden that's your purple patch gone. And that's definitely a concern of ours. So that's just a little aside explainer.
It's always my thing with Italy, because I think they're the best example of it. Normally in the Six Nations, and this is a de facto Six Nations game again. Scotland are in very good form. Got to recognise your chances to score tries and try and take them, even if you botch it.
Also, just to get some tries on the board, you know, you have a good opportunity to take it. Try and take it. But listen, we'll move on.
We'll move on from that aside to Scotland, who are actually in very fine form themselves. It was a bit of a disjointed outing against Wales, but they got the job done, and they'll be very grateful for it because they hadn't won in Wales in a while. And then the week prior, they looked mighty impressive against Georgia.
They did, yes.
Was it a week before the? They looked polished. They looked like they had tempo in their attack. They knew what they're about. They know what they're about with the ball in hand. They want to try and inject that tempo that Gregor has often cited. Wants to make them the most dynamic and quick team.
They've become a very solid team all of a sudden, and it's happened this year. Like really, just the inclusion of Rory Sutherland and just some really informed players like Jamie Ritchie has just taken them to this level of solidity. Obviously, they've got just a embarrassment of riches in the second row in terms of what to choose from. But they've got an awful lot of heft, and they've got a sort of a dynamism up front and a physicality up front that a lot of teams aren't dealing with, and it's sort of removed the panic from their play, where they're not constantly on the back foot. Like they matched England up front, they matched Ireland up front, they edged Wales up front, they beat France up front. Like their forward pack are winning them games now, and the whole team just has an air of calm about it that it never had before.
It's true. Like it used to be very frenetic with the knowledge that we're probably not going to be able to match these guys up front. We're probably going to concede a few scrum penalties. We're going to have to score all the tries that we can to try and keep us in that despite that. Now, when you're talking about Rory Sutherland, he has come back with such a vein of form, and then you have the likes of Kebbell as well, Nell on the bench. Like launching a guy like Nell off the bench, that's a luxury that Scotland have never had before.
Sander Fagerson has taken the jersey off him with superb scrummaging and brilliant play in the loose as well, and then all of the guys who do they have? Who are they on? Sam Skinner, Exeter man, is coming off the bench and lock for them.
There's a lot of heft to be bringing in after 60 minutes. It's very good. Their tight five is very, very good. Their options at lock, they have an embarrassment of riches, and this new back row that they have with Richie, Hamish, and Blade Thompson at number 8.
Nice balance.
Very physical, lovely balance to it.
They're useful in the loose. They're all good ball carriers. They're all comfortable enough on the ball. So absolutely, they're a side that's swimming in the deep waters in terms of international forward packs and very much doing even more than treading water at times, dominating teams. And they should be feeling bullish about that, and it has given them a calm. The only concern is really what's been outside that. Obviously this year, Finn Russell was gone, and then he was back, and now he's gone again. And Adam Hastings is
now gone, so in comes Duncan Weir. A chance for him to re-establish himself in the fold at least, because he's
always
kind
had good clutch.
And he's vanished from the picture in Scotland, and it's like he's not gone. He's in England. He's playing professional rugby in the Premiership. He's definitely an option for them. And then himself and Ali Price, a big task to try and just bring that passing game, that tempo, try and attack, get after Italy, especially in week 1, because they do have danger out. They have form guys out in the wide channels that are dangerous, and now with the reintroduction of Johnston of
Sam Johnson is definitely a difference maker.
You were calling for it. Johnson and Harris, I think, and you think is their best centre partnership.
It's the right balance of attack and defence.
Exactly.
Because they had brought in guys like Lang. Wasn't doing anything really out there, and when they go with the Hugh Jones combination, it's not solid enough on defence. Whereas certainly Sam Johnson, I think is the finest centre they have in the country, in that he's very, very competent both in attack and defence, comfortable passing the ball. So that's obviously an exciting element for them. The area of concern was in that Wales game. they won it, but Wales played poorly, and they played pretty poorly. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't use the ball that well. And I thought it was funny to see Squidge Rugby's video where he said Ali Price should be man of the match, and like my thought was very different. Like, I was thinking he was kicking well for sure, and everything was controlled, but it was a bit slow, and they kind of got out of jail. Like, they could have lost that game, and they were up,
I thought
they were on top.
I thought Wales were going to. There was a point at around 70 minutes where it was there for the taking for Wales. They just failed to take it, and it shouldn't have been.
I thought a reason why is that they just weren't moving the ball well enough.
Well, him getting he's the first one I've seen pinged for the use it call.
Yeah,
where he was told use it, and then like 7 seconds later, it's still in the ruck, and he's still looking at the ref. Come on,
that'll do your head in. Like, your forwards are dying for the ball. They're owning the contacts. Like, they need to move the ball a bit crisper, and without Russell or Hastings in there, there's going to be more pressure on Ali Price to speed up a little. And what Scotland don't need is to become an international Edinburgh just because they've got a big pack.
Yeah.
Where they're all of a sudden, they've gone from being trying to be the fastest team in Europe to being the slowest. They don't need that.
No.
They absolutely need to keep up playing with a fast tempo, taking tries, getting the ball into the hands of Darcy Graham and Stuart Hogg.
Yes, these are the danger guys, and they're the form guys with Van der Merwe in there now as well. Him and Graham with Stewie Hogg looking great as well in the Scotland jersey now. Yeah, like, get them in the ball, get them attacking those Italians who won't tackle them.
Do not exist to chase kicks. They exist to be given the ball in space. The wingers and Scotland, just because they have a big pack, do not need to go back to that.
No, but
that would be my only concern.
No, they need to blend the thing. What they have now is such a rock solid set piece, a good competent kicking game, and confident backs who can move the pill.
Yeah,
they need to marry all of these things into the top level international team that they are dying to become, and they've been working towards. They have been so long. Like, it's been like you've been like bigging them up every Six Nations. You go in thinking, "Geez, Scotland, is this their year?" They've been coming for a long time. And it's a big task for the likes of Duncan Weir now as well in the context of this game that he's got a chance to. Like, you've seen with England, there is a tactically expedient way to get at Italy by kicking the ball. Yes, their back three is a little ropey. You can find space with attacking kicks.
More expedient just to run at them.
Yeah, you don't need to do it every time. Like, if you run at them for a few phases, chances are they'll miss a tackle and you'll be in.
Yeah.
So, like, be confident in your ability to pass the ball to find the guys in space, and take the game to the Italians straight away. Set your stall out for the tournament going forward. Attack the team that you know you're better than, and try and put them to the sword, and be ready for a bigger test when Fiji or France come in the weeks to come. Kind of have a bit more tempo and a bit more verve in your attack. Yeah, but I actually think they're really well placed going into this to make a fist of winning this Autumn
even with the 210s missing notwithstanding, they do have a very balanced team. France are having to pick a change team. Fiji are going to be, one would assume, disjointed. Obviously, they're an unknown element and could be a danger to anybody.
Yes.
But the group that they're in, they need to. The task starts in Florence, but they'll be targeting. They've got such a good record against England in recent times. They'll be targeting topping this group and having a game against England to maybe win some silverware, and wouldn't that be incredible?
Yes, it would. And I would not begrudge them if they can pull all that off.
And I wouldn't put it past them just yet. Not just yet. Yeah.
But it does start here in terms of getting their things right, getting everything, all their ducks in a row to go and take on those tougher teams. That being said, any predictions for the game? I'm going with a strong Scotland win. By around 15, maybe 20
There's
points.
definitely a possibility that Italy make it scrappy and Scotland don't look right, and I wouldn't rule that out at all.
No, I wouldn't, especially with the changes. As you say, losing your first 2 10s is going to affect any international team.
I wouldn't rule out a bullish Italy performance out in Rome, but I do think Scotland... out in Florence, of course. But I do have a bit of faith in the competency of this Scotland team versus the competency of the Italy team, and I think scrums, line out drives, carries. I think they have enough that they're going to see at home convincingly enough, and I'm not convinced that Italy have too much to threaten their defence with. So you need something like, you might give Italy 10 to 12 points or something along those lines, but give Scotland somewhere around 30
to 30
to 10. There's a result. There's a nice even numbered result.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's definitely. I'd go somewhere similar, 15 to 20 point margin in the end, and the Scots looking maybe perhaps a little disjointed, but ultimately confident that they are better than Italy and will probably show that.
I would say so.
With that, we move on to the second game that's taking place on Saturday, which is between England and Georgia. It's going to be kicking off at 3 p.m. in Twickenham, and it is going to be reffed by Nigel Owens. good luck for Georgia there.
Yeah, the Georgians really can't catch a break, can they? I mean, no games. Nigel is great and I adore him, and I think he's a fantastic ref and he has a great attitude to the game, and he hates the Georgians and he hates the way the Georgians play the game, and when a scrum happens he looks away. He doesn't want teams scrumming for penalties, he doesn't want teams playing slow. He punishes them. He's been ref in charge of them a few times I've seen, and he doesn't vibe off them at all, and gets harsh and gets punitive.
Yes, he does.
So yeah, the Georgians haven't been able to catch a break so far, and I think Nige could be a problem.
Yes,
in there. Hopefully not, but
they're not going to get a.
He's still honest.
They're not going to get a single scrum penalty, man.
No, of course not. But they might not anyway.
They might not.
England
anyway.
might be on top, but we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the weather's concerned, out in Twickenham, it's going to be about 14 degrees Celsius. Some decent winds and potentially some wet weather.
Yeah.
London forecast not looking ideal actually.
Yeah.
That might be the only break for the Georgians.
Like we said in the Ireland preview, it's a little bit November out there. That's just the case.
Yeah, not in Rome, not in Italy. It's not.
No, it's downright August in Italy sometimes. Certainly by our own Irish standards. It could be 14 degrees and with a bit of spit and drizzle and a bit of wet weather, a bit of wind, just a bit of unpleasantness in all the weather potentially.
That is probably a break for the Georgians.
That is more so than the Nigel factor.
They'll need more than that, I suspect. We're obviously going to take a look at this game as well from the perspective of both teams, starting with the home side
and the champion, Six Nations champions, World Cup runners-up, England,
favourites for this competition.
I'm going to make them favourites for this game as well. I think they might have a little just a home advantage. They might have a little too much for the Georgians. Listen, I like the Georgians a lot. I think this is one of the worst matchups in world rugby for them, on the grounds that you're dealing with a monstrously bullish pack in England. As you said, it's only got more bullish with the inclusions of the likes of Johnny Hill, who's towering over Mauro Itoje in there, and Harry Williams, all these big Exeter men coming into the fold to back up what was already the dominant force in Europe in terms of forwards oriented rugby, second only to the Springboks World Cup champions. So England will be looking to test themselves. I know they've invited those Georgian forwards into their camp a few times to test them and warm them. They definitely they'll be looking to be dominant up front, and then with some of the guys whoever
Shara Kadza, I believe the Georgian captain, played with Hill and Genge for Hartbury College way back in 2012.
That's an interesting dynamic.
And apparently there's 5 or 6 players from that team have become test players for a range of different countries, including Ross Moriarty in Wales and a few others.
Quite a good team then, I imagine. When
they probably did some winning back in the day.
For sure. But just in terms of England, they're spoiled for choice in terms of options everywhere. This is a game where they're going to try and experiment a little. It might be a chance for some of the guys on the fringes to get in and get a run out. We don't quite have the teams as we do this.
No, we don't. Now. I'm sure you'll have them once this video is out. But absolutely, the England will be looking to mix it up in terms of their squad. They've been talking an interesting game ahead of this one. They've been talking up Georgia. As sort of a big, to be honest, physical
part
challenge.
of it is just chat, but I do think they have a respect for Georgia.
They brought them into training, and they've had those kinds of battles for them, and I think England as a nation sort of do respond to the type of physicality that Georgia bring.
Yes.
Almost more than they'd respond to a nippy team trying to run around them.
Yeah,
they get offended by that, whereas they'd enjoy someone taking them on physically. They're let's go.
Yes, indeed.
And there's kind of that element, especially up front, to a lot of those guys. They'll enjoy the challenge at scrum time.
Yeah.
Eddie Jones has interestingly been chatting about the prospect of hybrid players. He's been chatting about will we throw Ben Curry at 9? I think the future is going to be guys who can play forward and back, and you pick them at 8, and then they play some of the game as a centre or a winger. And it's one of those sort of loose Eddie Jones chat that we would be skeptical of, because we look at all the rugby positions from 1 through 15 and don't really find they're all specialist positions in a way, and the jobs all need doing that all of them provide, and for a team to be truly balanced, it does need an open side flanker and a blind side flanker actually, and a number 8 who can play a bit of ball, and centres and wingers who can finish, and scrum halves who can pass. But the one he threw out there was Ben Curry at 9, which of course inspired a lot of sort of Bergamasco comparisons, and I don't think he'll do that, But he does have form in this regard. When he was in charge of Japan back in 2015, he selected 9 forwards against Georgia.
Yeah.
And won the game 13-10. And that was obviously as a Japanese coach who was fearful of the Georgian pack.
Yeah, it's
managed to get
a good test for a Japanese pack that he was getting ready to ultimately beat the Springboks. There's definitely merit to that. It's a bit more goofy when you're being just England against Georgia. You're just going like, we'll have an ultimate forward battle. We are tougher than the Georgians.
I think you can pick 15 forwards if they want.
But what gets me about the 9 one is like
9 is super important.
9 is I used to be a 9 when I was in my playing days. It's they're the guys that set the tempo. So if you're going to pick a flanker at 9, you're just dooming yourself to be slow and narrow. Like that's all you're doing. It doesn't matter who you pick in the back line then. Because it's like, what are you doing? You're just going to play them up front. I don't know.
I suspect he won't do that. But I think it's sort of an interesting discussion, and I think going forward, I'm curious to see if he ever does experiment again with this sort of the hybrid player thing that he was discussing. In terms of like, you're just looking at ways for England to approach not just this game but this tournament from a position of dominance. Obviously there's scope for them to lose the run of themselves as they have done in times gone by and start getting looser and start getting stupider, or there's scope for them to really kick on and for the squad pressure and the pressure for positions to start coming into play. I certainly think giving guys like Jack Willis on form runs out would be massive.
For sure,
but just playing
Dom Brandt, the likes of him, get a look in.
So many options in the back row.
Thorley though out wide, your man, you'd love to see him.
Love to see Thorley, but I mean, even notwithstanding if they go for the same squad, I would love to see them just play a sort of a balanced, abrasive, physical, but English performance. I'd love to see them stay true to themselves. Against Italy, it was a bizarre performance. The bombs in the sky, the constant kicking. I didn't really see the point of any of it. And in fact, if Ireland were competent and managed to beat France by 10 points, they'd have some serious egg on their face because they didn't need to keep the scores as close as they kept it. And likewise against Georgia, it's one thing to talk them up, but on the field, like, England, for my mind, are the best passing team in perhaps rugby. Close, like, I know there's a lot of like Australia, New Zealand, like, what did you just say?
Indeed.
But I mean, they're a brilliant passing team, especially in the back line. I would love to see them using that physicality and that flow and tempo that they generate, but also just getting width and brilliant passing and exposing the Georgians and making their backs make tackles.
It's just crisp. What you mean when you say passing? I just gonna specify, because like obviously France in broken field passed the ball lovely, but these are like little pops and just instinct passes, catch pass, which is one thing. But England, as far as putting shape, and it comes kind of from what Saris are doing at the club game, where they just
had been doing, I
would say, rather. But running these very lovely modern shapes, a lot of them adapted from rugby league, lots of screens, but just being competent to approach the ball from such depth and be like have multiple guys in the back line who can just pass out in front of you where no stride is broken, and at their best they dominate you up front and bludgeon you, but they also just find the space and they just don't break stride. They can throw it at full tilt and it'll still find the man running forward, and it can hum. Their attack hums when it really goes well. And they also, when they know that they're the better side, there's something, as I've said before, in the English psyche that when they know they're up against a team that are underdogs, they tend to be brutally efficient at putting them to the sword. They don't tend to...
Apart from against Italy the last day.
Well, they still were never in danger of losing that game.
They were in danger of losing the tournament.
They were in danger of losing the tournament.
I don't think that was a positive performance by any stretch.
No, I don't.
I thought it was bizarre to see them kick the ball in the sky every single time, and like it didn't matter ultimately because of what happened in the Ireland-France game. But it could have mattered. And I'd like to see them take learnings from that and really attack Georgia where they're weak, which, like Italy, is in the defence of their backs and the tackle making of their backs. I mean, Georgia have been exposed a little bit at the World Cup by... They've been unable to control the tempo of Tier 1 teams, and they're unable to deal with it, especially in the wide channels.
Also unable to exit. Their kicking game is very loose, and England at their best are a good great kick return team.
The best kicking team.
But also kick return against Tier 2 sides. They love that stuff. They like, if it be Noel, if it be Daly, if it be anyone in the back, if it be Watson, all of these guys are very, very competent and dangerous at running back loose kicks. And Georgia have really not really built their kicking game to a high level at all. They're like very confident beating teams in Rugby Europe, but when it gets to facing the big dogs, a lot of the time they go back and forth across the midfield and then just kick it away.
They don't tend to exit in Rugby Europe with the boot. They don't use the boot that much at all.
They just run it out.
They move it to the wide channels, and they've worked their back rowers in the wide channels and try and win contacts and run up the field. Whereas obviously against Tier 1 teams, it's much more difficult to do, and you need much more strings to your bow.
Yes.
Than just that. Yeah, so absolutely, from an England point of view, I think with the ball, looking to be dominant. Obviously, starting that heftiest tight five, imposing themselves physically on their opposition, and looking, I would say, like attacking the scrum, like whether it's Genge or Marler or whoever it is, like getting in and getting after the Georgians, because their scrum has been a little dodge recently. It's been a lot less good than it had been.
Yeah.
They're perhaps missing just that match fit. Well, they are missing that match fitness, but they're perhaps like their second rows will be just a little less than sharp.
Yeah.
And they could be caught out. And England, you know, they have a brilliant scrummaging unit, and at their very best, serious weight in that pack, and they could move the Georgians back. And it's equal parts sort of disrespectful and bullish, but also prudent, and the way to really break the back of Georgia early and then start running up the score and testing yourselves in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the hybrid player talk is really about making the game, you know, not about winning the game and more about testing yourself in certain scenarios, which is not an un-Eddie Jones thing to do, but that's where the egg on your face scenario comes in, and you end up making a scrap of it stupidly when you should just be humming, as you say, along as a team and just winning this game and moving on to the next
swatting them
one.
aside and moving through this tournament as the favourites that they are, with a confidence and an accuracy that will be too much for the Georgians in week one.
Don't overthink it. You have a great attack, you have a brilliant pack. On defence, you should have too much for them. You have the edge in the kicking game. Play your game, and you should have more than enough to romp this one.
Yeah, I would like to see a bit more heads up footy than certainly the week before, where it seemed tactically they had a tactical imperative to kick the ball.
But that's my fear
regardless
with Eddie Jones,
of where
like,
the speed
once
is.
they get on top, is Eddie Jones going to start getting really goofy in games that they're massive favourites in, and start going, well, why don't we try and win a game where we only kick and don't ever pass, you know? Or why not against the Georgians pick a team of forwards and just try and win it that way?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, rather than doing those little exercises, actually staying true to yourselves and keeping and adding layers to your game while maintaining it is really the key. Like all back sides in times gone by.
That's true, and certainly when they've had to adjust to the loss of Tuilagi, who is such a fulcrum in the midfield for them, and with the games upcoming against Wales and against Ireland, like Tuilagi's been a big source of their dominance over them in recent times, so they'll have to be trying to be mindful of what they're doing in his stead. Is it Farrell Slade? Is it Jonathan Joseph, who he have up there? He has all these options. He should be kind of not so much kind of doing a little forward exercise with Georgia, but just getting his machine humming, as we say, and ready to go into those tougher games with a mind towards winning them confidently and comfortably, which they are set to do on all evidence this year for sure.
One would think so. For England, it's very much the beginning of a journey which they hope ends in them lifting another trophy this year. But absolutely, that like it just not just being tight and just not being silly with the ball,
being tidy
and not nice. Being tidy, not playing Georgia into the game should be enough for them to get the edge here at Twickenham.
Yes.
From a Georgian point of view, perhaps the reason why we can't be more bullish about the Georgians' chances in this one, they've had, you know, pretty nightmarish preparation for this tournament that they didn't even expect to be in until Japan pulled out a couple of months back. And so they've had
one game against Scotland where they were comprehensively beaten.
Yes, some of them are playing in France, but a lot of them, the domestic based players, haven't been able to play any games of rugby. And that's at all, club level, any level, since the COVID outbreak in March and Rugby Europe being suspended. And they wanted to get some games going, but the Autumn Nations Cup officials said that their sort of testing regime, etc., with the inter-club games was not, you know, robust enough for them to be allowed, so the games were called off. So they've got they're coming into this game with no rugby. And
like, is it 2 or 3 contact sessions they've had?
Yes, something very bizarre. They can't, the amount of contact they've been able to have. I'm sure they've been able to go into the gym, etc. I'd like to think they've been working on their ball skills and their tackle technique, but perhaps that's too much to hope for. But that's something that they really have been needing to add to their game. You know, even with all of this COVID stuff put to one side, you know, their coach Maisashvili, who was their defence coach going into the last World Cup, arguably the one guy in the whole enterprise who doesn't have too much positive to point to from the last World Cup cycle, in terms of I would say their defence is where they're weakest, and the bizarre inability to impose themselves physically off the ball as well as they do on the ball is something that's still, resides in this Georgian team. They aren't as physical when they don't have the ball, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Whereas they look downright Exeter when they manage to manufacture a chance to kick into the 22 and secure a line out. They're not even a mauling team. They're a pick and jamming team, and they will hold the pill indefinitely and win contacts when they have it. Yeah. But to be proactive on defense and use that same, because I used to love it there. Like occasionally in the centres they do make a big hit, and I kind of love the grappling aspect of it. Like they'll make a hit on the feet and then ragdoll them down.
Georgian guys have sort of that Dagestani wrestling thing
Sambo
going on.
Kind of wrestling in it. It's a background in there. They're used to it. They're very physical. I wish they would impose it more in the.
And I wish there's techniques that can be used on the clean out and in the stripping of a ball from contact that are wrestling based. And I always think it's great when you get a nation from a non-traditional rugby region. It's obviously a small nation, Georgia, less than 4 million there, but they love the game. They live and breathe the game over there. It's one of their it's built off their national sport, Lalo. It's very similar to that, and they're a nation who I wish nothing but good for. And yeah, unfortunately, I follow the Tier 2 rugby blog on Twitter, and they were sort of harbingers of doom. They were suggesting that this is going to be one of the all-time worst ever tours of any nation ever, in terms of just the preparedness and the stack of fixtures they have to play, the fact that it's come at late notice, the fact that they haven't got a permanent coach in, the fact that half their team haven't played any games. It's it all stacks up ugly for Georgia, and it's terrible to see, because they're honest as the day is long, and at their best would be such great value. But again, this is sort of the haves versus the have-nots as far as rugby and resources, and on a broader point, nations and resources. It's a poorer nation than the Six Nations are, and they don't have adequate help, and they don't have adequate ability to cope with the pandemic like the professional sport in the UK and Ireland and France have. And so that's it's a bit deflating, and I'm really hoping against all hope that they do a little better than has been foretold.
Might come against us. They're one show.
Wales, they have form in that regard. They ran Wales close the last time they played them.
Ran us close in 07 for sure. Like they are historically a very physical side and a very tough side, and just as you say, honest as the day is long. In terms of work-ons, yes, defence is foremost. It would be lovely to see them just be a bit more proactive and dominant in some of their collisions, not just in this game but in the tournament going forward. And then also passing. Obviously Tato Absandadza in at 10, he made his
I actually think that kicking is a bigger deal for Georgia than passing. I think they've learned pretty well how to pass the ball. They can sit deep and move the ball. They have quality. They definitely have quality in this team. I wouldn't make no mistake about that. They've got guys coming from the under-20s team who are a little more used to competing with the Tier 1 sides, and their under-20 team has a great record in recent seasons. They managed to compete with a lot of the Tier 1 sides and get some good wins. So they got some of those guys coming in. They've got a wealth of talent in the back row. They do. Becca Gorgadze and Otar Giorgadze are very classy players.
Saganadze as well.
Giorgadze scored a class try for Brive at the weekend. He's a rampaging ball carrier. We all know Becca Gorgadze in his blue scrum cap is a super player as well. Saganadze at 7, as you say, super player. Tkiliashvili, I
also
think
dangerous.
Was in super form last year, and another dangerous ball runner. And at their best, those guys are extremely physical, and they utilise that brute Georgian strength, where they do have a very natural strength. And get on top of teams. And likewise, their scrum at its best is a purring weapon with really good technique, but also it's an honest scrum as well, in that they get low and they drive hard.
They don't do as much fiddly sticks in terms of the kind of stuff you see with the
absolutely trying to create the perfect picture of just driving through a team, except if they drive through a team and the loose head side has a little bit more success than the tight head side, and so it turns a little bit off centre, Nigel just say they're deliberately wheeling it and pin them.
Which is your least favourite call in rugby.
Well, it's just because it's the only one Nigel ever gives at scrum time, and it's almost never true either.
No, it's just
one
side.
It's almost never fair.
One side is wilting. The other thing is, when you don't reward a dominant scrum, it becomes a mess and really under pressure. Because everyone's second
guessing what the ref is doing, and then the fiddly sticks go to 90, and Nigel starts getting annoyed, and reward the dominant scrum.
Which may be England in this contest
100%.
For sure.
100%.
But you're talking kicking. Certainly in the context of the World Cup, You saw that, like, it was interesting watching Rugby Europe that year, that they didn't exit through kicks at all. As we were saying, they were getting it from one side of the pitch to the other, where they had a back row forward who would usually bust a tackle of a little Spaniard and then scatter a Spaniard and go running into the 22, and then from there they dominate. Whereas in the World Cup, they weren't able to scatter a Spaniard out of the way. They had an Aussie tackling them. And then once that happened, the only thing they resorted to was a Lobsendad's a box kick that was inevitably too deep, that led to them just not having the ball, and then, as you say, their defence wasn't proactive enough to stop these top teams.
I really don't like Tier 2 teams being like copying Tier 1 teams in terms of like things like exit plays and reset plays. Like it just resorting to the box kick, the Caterpillar Ruck and box kick that all of these teams are ready for. Like England have made fools of Ireland doing that. So Georgia can't do it. Like better teams have England have prepared for dealing with this from better teams. The onus is always on you as the Tier 2 team to be smarter. Because you're under resourced.
Well, you saw it with the Conor O'Shea's Italy and the Ruckgate kind of thing.
That was an example.
Tactical nous has to come to the fore if you're that outmatched everywhere else. You have to try and think your way around it. And as you say, running out of ideas after a few phases and then tamely box kicking to England. That's just doom. Curtains.
100%. I mean, in terms of nuggets of hope, they have a young 10, Tato Absendadza, who we've talked about already on the podcast. He's a guy actually who played for my club, Terenure College rugby club. He played for us for a couple of years
before being hoisted away to go to the World Cup.
Exactly, and he's still a young man, but he made history as being one of the first 10s to get starting berths in one of the major leagues in rugby, starting in top for the top couture side, Brive, and doing well. His place kicking is on point. He seems to be going from strength to strength, and he's like a young man. When you're established as either a starter or a squad player in a top couture side at his age from a tier 2 nation, you're already extremely ahead of the curve versus your peers.
Yes, it's true.
We have him up there actually, Tato, and he's certainly a player where a lot of Georgian hopes would lie, because where traditionally the game of rugby comes from Lelo, they're used to taking contacts with a ball, they're used to tackling, they're used to passing a ball around if need be, they're used to mauling, but actually there's no kicking in the game of Lelo. And that's
there's no tradition of it in it. And it's unusual because most Tier 2 sides, when they come up against a Tier 1 side or a side like England, it's the physicality that shocks them. And it's the difference of athleticism that shocks them. But that's never been the case with Georgia. Georgia are game for the physicality. They are actually physical on a Tier 1 level. It's just that they're missing all these other strings to their bow that are needed to kind of make a cohesive team, and kicking is definitely the one aspect where just not many of them are good at. Even Matthias Felia in fullback, some of his kicking is a little loose at times.
He's not a kicker of a ball. He's a nice running fullback, which is nice to see, but he's not actually a kicker of football. That lad is. Tato is. He is a kicker of a ball, and his kicking game needs to be varied. It needs not to be straight. It can be deep at times, but the kick chase has to happen, because at times against Scotland there was no kick chase, which was dreadful.
So Scotland had a field day running it back at them, and England will.
If they kick as loosely as they did against Scotland and chase as poorly, they will be tortured all day. So they have to be smart in terms of where, when and how they kick the ball, and Tato is going to be crucial to that.
Because their whole game plan, like Exeter actually in terms of the parallels, is built around getting themselves into the 22 with the ball, and once they're there, that's where they're at their most confident and most competent. They can go through many phases, they can actually dominate collisions, and they can generate scores from there. But it's all about exits and manoeuvring, and you have to be a bit more coy when you're outmatched as they are to try and generate that. And that's going to be the dynamic for all their games in this, be it Wales, be it Ireland, be it England. They're going to have to try and kind of work on their tactical kicking and work on their exit play and negotiate the territory game a bit more effectively. All we're looking for is a bit of growth in that area, a bit of endeavour in that area.
Kicking on the front foot and finding touch, maybe. That's like key. I think if and when the 50-22 rule comes in, it'll dial all of the minds on that a little bit more. It would be nice to see someone, especially a Tier 2 side, get a little bit ahead of the curve on that. I'm looking at Italy and I'm looking at Georgia and I'm going, guys, why are you kicking the ball in the air? This thing is going to go out of fashion fast. It's already going there. You're seeing teams like Ireland and teams like Wales starting to fail.
Yes.
Like the kicking the ball in the air thing is dying a death right now.
It is.
You've got to be more versatile. The most versatile kicking team in the world right now is England.
Yes, and they get a lot of they generate so much pressure from it, and I expect Mariashvili to have a rough day of it in terms of fielding a lot of those kicks. It's a very difficult thing to do. But yeah, between that, more proactive kicking and more proactive defending is all you're looking to see from this Georgian side 100%. Going forward.
Oh God, I would bite your hand off for a nice scrappy game where they could be in it. Like, I would love to see that.
We'd all be delighted.
I'd love to see them perform well.
That being said, predictions.
Oh, stop.
Massacre. Is the spread 40 points?
I'd take England. If you gave me that spread, I'd take England to beat it. It's tough. It's tough. It breaks your heart. Like, you don't want that to be the case for Georgia, but it is.
It is the
right
it's
now,
what they're staring down the barrel of a loaded 12 gauge right now, and they have very little to diffuse it.
England by 50, I'd say. It depends a lot on England and in terms of their own approach. Like, if they do the goofy performance that they put in against Italy,
or if they do go with a 7 at 9 and then they go and don't pass it at all, maybe they keep the score down, and that would be a mercy. But
even then, the fact. The lack of rugby, like, we're all talking about the dynamics that'll unfold probably in the first half, but where the lack of rugby will come in is the second half, and towards the latter stage,
final quarter is always just England.
That's like you're talking about. You can almost give them 30 points there.
Yeah.
So like, what's it going to be when 60 minutes hits and add 30?
Yeah.
You know.
That's kind of what we're looking at.
So
it could be an ugly tournament for Georgia. We hope it's not. But
we desperately hope it's not, but it could be.
But but little improvements. You're going to have to try and look for these little kernels.
Yeah, so I'd say England by 50.
Fair enough. Yeah. And with that, I suppose we'll move on to the Sunday game. We the Sunday game. Speaking as an Irish fan, yes, we have France v Fiji. The rematch is what I'm thinking of it, because the last time this happened, Fiji came away with the spoils.
They did.
It was an awesome contest, that game, and it was
one of my favourite games of rugby. Perhaps certainly one of my favourite ever autumn games of rugby. In
yes.
terms of the autumn series.
Like we were saying before this happened, that a lot of them are dead rubbers, a lot of them are like just not stellar. Like, the argument is they're friendly games. That one wasn't a friendly game. That was a proper test match, and it was great to see Fiji win it. And this one will be happening at 3:15. That's British time here, at 4:15 local time, in the Stade de la Rabine in Vannes, which is an unusual spot for a French game. But I'm not opposed to this. I like moving it around.
I definitely like moving it around. Again, the no fans thing is a bit of a shame.
Yes.
Matthew Carley's in charge. What's interesting about Vannes, what a nice idea. It's not in the south of France. It's along it's near the Atlantic, along the west coast, and as such. We're actually set for some bad weather. According to, if the forecasts are to be believed, it's going to be a wet and windy day. Temperatures around 16 Celsius, but one of those, you want to say it's a little bit November. That's quite a lot November.
Yes, indeed. That's 16 wind in the rain at Atlantic breeze. That might be a bit chilly for some of those Fijian lads, but it'll be chilly for some of those French lads.
It's not especially chilly, 16 degrees.
No, but with the wind, it is.
It's a warm wind, isn't it? It's a warm, stormy breeze. Like, I don't think they'll be cold, but it's definitely not a game that lends itself to shootout.
Your basketball Fijian style flair that you would normally like to see.
It's not something they would be unusual with seeing. If you look at Fiji in domestic rugby, they get absolute showers and wind and the like.
They're in an
island in the middle of the ocean.
This is true. Yeah, so they will not be averse to it. It's just in terms of the stylistic style, the purists that we are looking for good rugby, and whenever Fiji take the field, getting excited at the prospect of all these flashy offloads. Probably not going to be a spectacle like that. But what I would say as a point of optimism for Fiji, the last time they won, it wasn't built on their rambunctious offence, although Radradra scored a lovely try and they did attack well, but it was defence was where they won that game in France last time, and hopefully
100%.
They'll bring some of that steadfastness in defence, and that's one of the most notable improvements, and it's actually one of the areas where they're starting to distance themselves from other Tier 2 teams in terms of competence, and I hope we don't see them regress in that. I hope we will see a cohesive Fiji team that are there for the fight.
Absolutely. We are going to take a look at it from the perspective of both sides. We're going to start with France, the home side, who are just coming off a powerful win over Ireland.
Yes.
And to your point, they're not underestimating this. I saw an interview with Boutier, the fullback, who was talking about, the last game they played Fiji, and the other thing for this French team is that the rules with the LNR mean that if these guys are to play, if the main team are to play, as we suspect this weekend,
they will be unavailable.
They will all be unavailable going into the last 3 weeks, and it'll be a brand new French team. And I guess it kind of makes sense to have, to put a full stop on this team, have the first 3 weeks one team, second 3 weeks another team,
I think that's
rather than disjoint the whole thing.
That makes much more sense. I actually think with this, between that decision that they've kept the same squad, obviously for the Six Nations, and the fact that they're talking so bullishly, they were talking bullishly about avenging their home losses against Ireland, which they did. Now this one is also fresh in the memory. They're targeting this. I just think with the World Cup, I'm so glad of it, because for the last 10 years I have been weeping for French rugby. I love the way they play the game. I love their attacking verve, and they just seem to lose that entirely for a decade. But they got the World Cup, much to our chagrin. Our bid was outbid, it's going to be France 2023, and nothing will focus their minds quite like that. As far as a World Cup cycle, which they very often ignore, they won't be sending a touring party over to New Zealand to get hammered 3 weeks in a row and not really be caring that much. I don't think we're going to see that in this 4-year cycle at all. I think we're seeing a France side that is more focused on building towards a World Cup that they're hosting with a mind towards winning. And that's exactly what we're seeing, because we've always known they've had the talent. And sure, with the Eleanor forcing their hand, we're going to see 2 whole squads worth of French talent over the next few weeks, which is exciting enough in its own right. But it's a breath of fresh air, and certainly it started with Toulouse over the last few seasons, and it's kind of built into this French team, bled into this French team, that they've rediscovered what they're about. They know how to counter-attack again. They know how to flood small channels with loads of numbers and get their hands free and get attack space with tempo. They have a halfback in Dupont who is one of the best in the world. It's exciting times for France, to be honest. I'm really, as much as I was bummed out watching them beat us last week, I was also kind of glad to see them execute some of those tries the way they did.
Yeah, absolutely. They're certainly looking crisp and brilliant, and like that old school team of the aughts, where they were just an electrifying attacking force with some quality up front as well. As you say, this is the last game for a lot of these guys prior to going back to their clubs, and certainly after the great win against Ireland and wins against Wales. This would be another one to put to bed, that last result against Fiji, and just go off happy as opposed to deeply frustrated, which they would if they slipped up and lost this game.
Indeed, so there's definitely stakes.
There's definitely stakes. It's always a dangerous game when you're playing Fiji.
Oh, yeah, no, you can't sleep on Fiji.
It's not just you can't sleep on it. We don't know what they're going to look like, except that they are familiar with them in the context of the top coutures. They're familiar with these individuals and how powerful and how great they can be in the open field. They're also familiar with Vern Cotter as
one of the great brains
made his name in French rugby in Clermont, but also has moved on, has done a great job with Scotland, reinvigorated that team, has a great track record. Him coming in is as good a coach as they've managed to import and get hired perhaps ever.
Yes, I would say so.
So a Vern Cotter Fiji team coming to town, them knowing the terrain so well, is a danger from a French perspective, and they'll have to be tight. And there were times in that Ireland game, as good as France looked going forward, there were times when I, as an Ireland fan, was thinking, God, we could get at them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't just romance. They were softening out of some tackles. Yeah. They were giving away some penalties stupidly.
Yes, still true.
And they were playing us into the 22 and letting us set up some attacks. And we managed to, a couple of times, France had the game put to bed and let us back in.
Yes.
And nearly let us win the game.
Yes.
And that's definitely an area that they're going to have to tighten up on. Discipline, tackling, defence, getting on top of these Fijians and making them make the errors.
Yes.
That's vital, because they, at times at their worst, they could be a bit soft.
Yes.
And that's something that Fiji could exploit.
Checked out. They can switch off at times, which is definitely a bad sign in any team. And against Fiji, Fiji are a more dangerous side than Ireland in terms of trying to execute when you're standing off them on defence.
Yeah.
Their instincts are to attack the space all the time and to offload, and they've freshly captained Semi Radradra, so it's you know what they're going to be about. They're going to be looking to try and attack space regardless of the weather, and looking to try and get their hands free into contact and pick apart what is, as you say, a suspect defence. Although the likes of Bernard Leroux has really stepped up for them this year. I remember last year not being convinced at all of his credentials in the second row, whereas now I'm pretty confident he's their best option at second row. He's been brilliant for them. And then similarly, Aldrit and Olivon have been good, assured guys in there. Have kind of the culture of the
I think Willems has stepped up massively as well. He's super physical influence. And then, as you say, the backline, Dupont and Ntamak pulling the strings.
Vakatawa also a distributing force. Him v Radradra, if that's what it is, in the 13 shirt, that would be such a box office game.
That is an incredible matchup. That's just a superb matchup for Test rugby and for this game. In terms of just the game itself, obviously it's a full stop for this team. So looking at it defensively, like that's the real area that they're going to have to step up. I think swallowing up Fijian ball, owning those contacts, capitalizing on the disruption, and then striking off
the
turnover.
Fact that it's wet to go target the ball in the contact, as we were always talking about. Like they don't actually have out and out poach men on the pitch, especially with Marchand starting. That shot comes off and he is a legit threat, but that's not really where most of their guys' game is about. But you can still generate turnovers by just dislodging the pill in contact, and the Fijians will be holding the ball loosely, looking for the offload. So if you can manage to dislodge that, they will break off turnover. And you saw with Dupont, Ntamak, Vakatawa, all these guys are very, very well adept at transitioning into counter-attack.
Yeah, exactly. Transition is crucial, but just defensive disruption that leads to either turnover ball or lineouts in your favour or scrums in your favour. Yeah. Like you can march your way up the field, and they don't need to force anything, I don't think, because Fiji are going to be the team that's more disjointed. They haven't played any rugby together themselves. France need to manage their way through the team, contain what Fiji have, own the game up front a little bit, get on top of those collisions, and then move it wide.
Scrumming for penalties might be an option here 100%. As well, because they have a legit scrum. Their front row is danger, and their front row replacements are danger as well. And just the likes of Camille Chat off the bench, that Marchand Chat dynamic at hooker is one of the best in the world. And as a scrummaging force, they are certainly more than Fiji. And if they can target the pill, create those turnovers or just turfed balls that create that set piece, and then scrum for penalties, they can slowly exert that dominance, and control would be lovely to see from them in a game.
Yeah, exactly. And control and focus, like those are the two things that you might cast aspersions on. We know the attacking flair is there, and we know when the chance is there they can take it, and that's something that they're obviously going to want to build on and want to do, and flooding the right channels and moving it wide at the right times, and exposing at times Radradra's over aggressiveness on defence, getting the ball over him,
or just a disjointedness in general. If Fiji are that way, they'll be looking to capitalise on it.
But that said, what happened the last time was that Fiji got up in their faces, made all the tackles, didn't stop, and France ended up getting frustrated and panicking.
Yes.
And this time they need not to panic.
They need to try and reverse that.
Yeah, they need to exert the control themselves, and if Fiji are stepping up to the task, they don't need to panic. Dupont can pin the corners, Ntamak, they can move them around, they can move the point of attack. Boutier, if need be, can kick the ball 60 metres down a field if you're ever in danger. Yeah. So they just need to be smart, play in the right areas of the pitch, not force anything, defend well and maintain focus, and then the chances will come. They're a very good team. They just need to build those elements of control, and they should have enough now to see off this Fiji team.
You would think so. And speaking of this Fiji team, they're obviously in a similar regard to Georgia. Their preparation has been disrupted quite comprehensively by COVID breaking out in the camp, so that has prohibited some players from being available for selection. We don't actually know who yet. We haven't actually got that info.
Yes, but data protection rules dictated be so, and that's fine.
That is fine. I don't want to go naming people if it's going to be a black mark. But we do know that Radradra's been named captain. We know that they had to cancel a game against Portugal, which was going to be a pretty vital hit out, similar to what we were saying about Georgia. They're going to be coming in pretty undercooked and pretty cold.
Except, like, a lot of some of
these guys were meant to be in the Barbarian squad as well, so they've had two cancelled warm up games.
There is truth to that, but the vital difference between Fiji and Georgia is that COVID didn't shut everything down domestically. No. They've had a full domestic season, and Vern Cotter's brought a lot of young guys. And then also a lot of guys are playing in Europe. And so this is a squad of experienced players who have got some matches under their belt in Europe, coming together with some guys who've played a domestic season in Fiji, and they're melding a squad together. So I actually think the issues are going to be less about rustiness and less about not being able to get to the physical pitch, and more just about, are they in sync? Are they clicking as a
cohesion
team?
And then some tactics and just some being on the same wavelength and being up to the pitch of things, because France have had two tough tests now against Wales and against Ireland to get themselves really in a good kind of frame of mind about what they're trying to do and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and just a knowledge of and a trust of the player next to you. Which Fiji definitely had going into the last World Cup and showed shades of it during the World Cup, but we haven't really seen a lot of these guys together on the same pitch since then in a competitive instance. So
I can tell you on paper, some of the names blow your heads off. I mean, the two wingers listed in the squad back in October, Nemani Nandolo and Jos Tuisova, we haven't seen them play together in a while. It's great to see Nandolo back.
Yes.
Him coming in there, combining with the likes of Bottia and Ranradra.
Bottia and Ranradra is a great centre pairing.
Yeah, on the face of it, can you that backline's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it's physical.
Murray Valu, Ben Volavola.
Yeah.
One of Lamani or Matawalu or Kuravoli at halfback.
I'd say it'll be Lamani.
It's usually Lamani.
But Lamani and Volavola at halfback, they're the controlling element, and Volavola's boot's going to be crucial in terms of moving France back, especially if it's wet. But there's no reason at all why they shouldn't think they could be to the physical match of these French teams.
Or attack them.
Bottia run at Entomac.
Yes.
Hit that guy.
Yes.
With ball in hand.
Is a tank.
Exactly. And Ranradra likewise. Like, they definitely have the scope to at least disrupt the French defence and get on top of them.
Yeah.
And even without the classy offloading game that we know they have, that we know they can bring, and going around the corner and having instincts for the open space, which they're going to bring, just edging contacts is going to be vital here.
Yeah.
And it's not undoable against France. We saw Scotland do it. We saw Scotland disrupt them. And Fiji are big and strong.
They are big and strong. Like, we know that they aren't shy of contact at all. And looking at some of their back row options, some of these guys are really big and strong. Some of even their second row options, you have the likes of Nakarawa and Ratuva in there, who are no strangers to top tier rugby. As far as physicality, I think they're in there for the combat of the game. I think set pieces where they will struggle, and it is traditionally so. They will struggle to be cohesive in the scrum and to deal with what is quite a monstrous French scrum. When they all get it cohesive, they can be very, very dangerous.
The solution is not to have the game be about that.
Exactly.
Protect the ball when you have it. Yeah. Definitely don't run away from your instincts, but don't throw panic offloads. No. Offload on your own terms when you're picking good lines, when you're working to the open field, when you're on top of the contact.
Yeah.
But mind the pill outside of that, and I think the kicking game of Volavola is going to be vital.
Yes, the kicking game of Volavola, because I've seen them on occasion revert to a box kick, and I think to a man, be it Lomani, be it Matawalu, none of them can do it. They're really bad at the skill. They're actually among the worst box kicking scrum halves in the world. So just don't make them do it.
No, of course.
Just don't do it.
Absolutely not.
You have Ben Volavola there.
Volavola's kicking game is actually, you compare him to a lot of the tier 2 10s, there's no contest. Like, we're pulling our hair out talking about Georgia and Italy and their inability to do anything other than bombs in the sky. Volavola, credit to him, he's not that guy.
No, he has
quite
a varied
the corners, he can move the ball around. Absolutely. And he's a decent passer.
And he's actually he was kind of a breath of fresh air in that regard, because a lot of the times Fiji's backline would consist of like all centres or all wingers, and including the 10, and like that has been the case a lot of the time. Ben Volavola is an out and out 10. That's exactly what he is. He has a lovely varied kicking game, nice balanced running game, good distribution game. So if they'll be looking, like, the parts are all there, as is always the case with, to be honest, with both of these teams, France and Fiji. An embarrassment of riches a lot of the time in terms of the calibre of their players. Fiji are just lacking a little bit for preparation time, and we'll be wondering to see how to the pitch they are. But it would be
if
nice
they can
to see
be
them
physical on both sides of the ball, physical and disciplined, and those are the things I'm looking at. Discipline in offense, meaning no loose rucking, no stupid offloads when you're on the back foot. Just be mindful of the ball, and then when the chance is there, take it and strike and use all those offensive chops and get Tuisovas and Nolos and Ranradras on the ball in space, because by God, they can torture you, and they could torture this French team. Absolutely, even in the wet. But minding the pill and then being disciplined on defence means getting out, getting into the faces, shutting down the space Entomac has to work with. Bottia, big hits, but bending your body, wrapping your arms.
A red card is curtains.
Exactly.
It's not an unlikely thing to have happen. A rusty, slightly sloppy tackle technique from a Fijian, game over.
So that's what I mean about discipline. Just winding yourself in that little bit where you're restrained enough that you're not making stupid mistakes. Not being reckless, but at the same time be your physical brilliant selves, because you have the talent to absolutely run this French team close, 100%.
Close, if not over the line. And it would just to go with all of that, I would just say do everything with purpose. Like, be purposeful with the ball and without the ball. Don't be a bit like wishy-washy, because we saw it in the World Cup against Uruguay, in the game that they famously lost, where they were doing things for the sake of doing things and not being direct and purposeful, and they were getting loose and they were forcing things then. And then it was the more disciplined side were Uruguay, and they took it from them. Like, they need to couple that discipline with just a clear sense of purpose about what they're doing with and without the ball, and that'll be good enough for a really good showing and a good performance, and could be good enough to get them in the contest. I definitely rate Fiji as a team that can compete with any team.
You talk about them as a tier 2 team, and you kind of dismissively say, France should be able to win, and then you look at the team and they go, holy crap, like the talent is incredible. A tier 2 team. The talent is incredible. Yeah. So they absolutely have scope to compete.
It's always the case that each of those guys plays professional rugby in a club in Europe or wherever else. But not only do they play professional rugby, but they are like a star and like an absolute icon in the team, a fulcrum in whatever team they are, be it Tuasova, be it Radradra, be it whoever.
Yeah, it's almost like there's stars everywhere and there's no one to do the grunt work sometimes. There's a little bit imbalance occasionally. Like you've got too many stars and not enough workmen, and sometimes it's a bit like that. But
it's our game of the weekend in terms of the fixture 100%. List. I think it is.
Yeah, like if you're thinking Ireland Wales is the game of the weekend, it's not. I'm an Ireland fan. I can tell you it's not. This is the definite spectacle of the weekend.
Yeah, and with that, what do you think's going to happen?
It's impossible, isn't it? Like you talk about the prediction thing. Like, how can we possibly know what Fiji are going to look like? I just think it's crazy difficult to ask me. Like, I think they'll both be playing some rugby out there.
Yes,
and that's what's going to happen. Like, it's very, very hard to say what kind of Fiji is going to turn up and what kind of France is going to turn up. My suspicion is that France are wary of Fiji, and that they're targeting the game and they're going to be focused. And then my instinct says that actually isn't going to be enough to put it to bed, and that Fiji are going to show up as well, and then we'll have a humdinger of a game like that. I maybe that's the optimist in me talking, but I don't think that France showing up and being focused is going to be enough to put this Fiji team to bed. I certainly hope not.
No.
I think Fiji will be physical. I think they'll be there. I think they have tries in them. I think they have physicality in them. I think that the tight 5 in France will see them over the line. So I'm going to say like 22-16 to France. They're not going to get it all their own way. It's a bit of a wet weather game. It's going to be a 1-score game.
Okay,
for France.
Good call.
That's what I'll say.
I hope so. I hope it's a 1-score game either way, and I hope Fiji are up to the blow. My fear with it is just looking at the years that it is, such as it is. It's obviously everyone's affected by COVID, and everyone's
Fiji less than anybody.
Although
the squad has it, I guess.
Yeah, no, the squad has it.
This is all with the caveat that maybe they'll rock up when they're announcing the team and say, actually, like 15 lads have COVID, and this is all we can field, or we can't field anything.
Exactly, and I've just looking at it's been incremental for every team getting back in. We saw in the first few weeks of Super Rugby Unlocked a bit of a lackluster show.
These guys have been playing though.
I know they've been playing. But what I'm saying is just the teams being rusty. I've seen it in the Pro 14. I've seen it even in the Six Nations. Even Super Saturday was played to a more like I'm worried for Fiji as far as that cohesiveness, and I fear France are targeting this enough that they may do them dirty.
Not having it.
No, I'm gonna say that it's gonna be a 10-point win for France.
That's okay.
I'm gonna slightly
more. You were building up to a dangerous.
I'm gonna push it. I know, because I think the wet weather will keep the score down a little. Yeah. But I think France will have too much, and I hope Fiji are, as you say, to the blow, but I fear they might be a little disjointed.
I think they'll be there.
With Vern Cotter pulling the strings, getting them ready.
I think Vern Cotter's had these boys in camp and has been getting them ready.
Hope so.
100%.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we will move on from international rugby, we move on to the last of the international things. We have to look back on a 2-test series taking place in Montevideo between Uruguay and Spain, Los Teros and Los Leones. And
there's great colour in that.
It was blues v reds. It's two great teams. To be honest, Spain really came bulling and secured the opening test with a 32-20 win. That was it was closer than that because there was a kickoff. That try off the kickoff was fantastic. They did a coast-to-coast return of a kickoff that I as good as I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful score. And their other scores were actually all sort of tight forward games. I think it's an interesting one. Like, I saw some Uruguayan fans somewhat taken aback by that first result. Like, Spain shouldn't be going to Uruguay and winning. Spain are a coming force.
Yes, they've been.
And I think that as a general rule, the Rugby Europe competition, Spain are the quickest team in that competition, but it's a more physical competition than the Southern Hemisphere one. It's less quick, but more physical.
Yeah.
And at times, that physicality can be shocking. And the difference is that Spain are just a little more used to that. Like, they have to play Georgia every year.
Yes.
Whereas, like, the punishments that get doled out to Uruguay are by the Argentina 15 of speed. We're even quicker than you.
Yes.
And Uruguay had some great moments across both tests. moving the ball really quickly, especially off first phase, off lineouts and off kick
just
returns,
isolating a narrow defence or something. And,
picking good lines and very clever strike plays, and they definitely had some good speed. But Spain owned the contact areas on a lot of occasions, and owned the forward battle at times, especially in that first test.
Yes,
and got it home and saw it home, and that's a famous win for Los Leones, and they're definitely in there
for sure.
Obviously, with the caveat that Uruguay still have none of their players. This is a test window. To my irritation, this is a test window. You're not supposed to block players from playing test rugby.
And yet, any top couture,
Santiago Arata and Kessler, and
the centre is
who's the 10? Sorry, Felipe
Berchessi, that's right.
All of those guys not involved, and that would do your head in.
It would. It's a consistent thing. Tier 2 teams getting run roughshod over by the Eleanor.
And this was a good two test series, but listen, it was a great series anyway.
Yeah.
The Spanish guys weren't disrupted by the Eleanor. The Uruguayans were, and unfortunately for Los Terros, it proved that first test proved too much. Spain shocked them and scored 4 tries, including that super
worldy of a score at the very end of it. But the second test was a Uruguayan win, 19 points to 10, which was good enough to secure that victory. But as they did, it was an aggregate score, so it ended up 42-39 in favour of La España, or Los Leones, which is just like it would annoy Richie McCaw. I know the aggregate scoring thing, they shared the spoils really, but to have them play 2 tests in Montevideo and have it only be 3 points separating them after both of them, that's just great stuff, to be honest.
We need more of this. We need more tier 2 teams who are on the same level playing each other, like continents aside. Like, this is why we talk about the Autumn Nations Cup, to almost bring it back full circle. In terms of test rugby talk, we need to have teams playing sides at their own level more often. This is great series. Even in COVID year, making this happen is brilliant. And shout out to Uruguay and Montevideo for putting on so much rugby.
Well, between the Sudamerica Cuatro Nacionales and this to follow, it was a proper little festival of rugby in Montevideo, and really, really good value. But as we were saying in the Autumn Nations Cup thing, there's no reason why these guys aren't in the same pool in Division 4 of the Autumn Nations Cup. Let's have that be the case next year.
And
I love it.
Namibia in the mix as well, and all of this, and everyone can come into Europe. Obviously, this is a post-COVID world, but we'd love to see more of these. I mean, these two have unfinished business now.
They do, it's a proper little rivalry that's already stoked.
What I will say is that Spain actually, like, they were beaten in the first half by Uruguay in that second game, but they came right back into it, and with 8 minutes to go, they were in a position to they were putting the pressure on to actually win the game, not to lose it on points difference. And Uruguay kicked an exit from their own thing. It was a good kick, but the Spaniard, one of the Spanish guys, I can't remember who, smacked the Uruguayan 10 late, really egregious penalty, and the ball ended up landing in the Spanish half. And so the penalty from being in their own in goal,
and
the penalty
10 up.
The penalty was all the way back at the Uruguayan 10, and they kicked that 3, which pushed it out to a 2-score game and won the game for them. So there was a cataclysmically bad error from Spain that pushed them away from actually being in a position to potentially
win both tests.
But as it is, Uruguay won, and actually Uruguay had the ball. They were attacking the last play and dropped it,
which would have been like literally they only needed a drop goal to share the series.
The little 9 who started for Uruguay is brilliant as well, and then the replacement 9 doing that off the bench was not good.
Good picture. But still, both of these sides playing a lovely tempo of rugby.
There was a great balance and a great dynamic between them both. Spain probably with the little edge up front, Uruguay possibly the crisper passing game of the two. That great try from Spain notwithstanding,
for sure.
But wonderful back and forth, wonderful rugby for those are the games we want to see. And less mismatches and more competitive fixtures.
Touring tests among tier 2 sides. Absolutely a great thing.
I have no issue with an America's competition. I think that should be done. I have no issue with the Rugby Europe Division 2. I think that's fine. But in the autumn series, getting teams to play at their level is going to be crucial and to building everyone up. And I'd love to see Namibia enter that mix as well.
Because Namibia are starved for games all the time. That exactly our thought. But overwhelmingly glowing positive praise of Montevideo and Uruguay and just this great test. And Viva Los Leones. Well done.
They look out for the stuff. I would only give one shout out, which the South American Rugby Union need to do much better. Because in terms of broadcasting the games, they're broadcasting them exclusively on their app, which
Yes.
I have downloaded and it's easy to download, but what on earth are you doing? Like, people need to be able to watch these games.
Yes.
Put them out, put them on YouTube, put them everywhere.
Facebook Live,
Yeah,
all of
get
this
them,
stuff.
get
Yeah.
eyeballs on your teams playing rugby. This is a great brand. Like, this is great stuff. 42-39 over 2 games between Spain and Uruguay. Please let people watch that. And nobody's downloading your app to watch it. Not the average punter.
No.
It just rules out the casual fan.
Yes, which is a constant gripe with us. It keeps happening in rugby.
But you're a tier 2 team. You need eyeballs, but more so from your own countries. You need people watching. You need to be getting people's eyes.
Try and get sponsors invested so that you have sponsors at the games. You can do a little sponsor thing in the background, but then once they're there, just put it out for free.
Did you stop? Like, how many thousands of people did you stop from? Maybe not thousands, but how many people realistically did you stop from watching that game to generate, I don't know, like 100 more downloads on your app?
Yeah,
like, that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
And that's the only negative from this, because it's a great thing to be putting on, but in terms of broadcasting it, get it out there, get people watching it,
and make comprehensive highlights packages for YouTube. 10-minute ones, 5-minute ones that you can chuck out there 100%. As well. Show the rugby. Let the rugby be seen. And with that, we'll move on to domestic rugby. Back in South Africa for the first time in a couple of weeks. We've left them to it. Super Rugby Unlocked, round 6.
Onwards it rumbles.
Onwards it rumbles for sure.
And I tell you, there have been some dramatic changes since the last time.
The dynamic has kind of shifted. It's already over.
It's gone Bulls' way.
It's gone a blue Bulls' way.
Jake White's men. They have
arrived. Do you know what? They just have too many Springboks to be stopped by a lot of these teams.
They've started to play some tidy rugby.
They have. Stemmen Gans at 13, I'm excited by. He's a lovely looking player. The Bulls have really pulled away in the last few weeks. They had too much for the Lions at Ellis Park. It was close, and it was only really an Elton Yankees interception at the last, in the last quarter that put it beyond doubt.
The Bulls were knocking on the door, and the Lions were, I think, 1 score down, and they needed to resist.
Yeah.
And then one of the penalties, Bulls kick it in the corner, overthrow the line out, and fantastic, you got away with it. The lad who catches it for the Lions flicks it back to Elton, which is questionable to begin with.
Yes.
Like, you've just got the ball at your own line. Can we settle down here? And then Elton throws an absolute ridiculous intercept pass right to Stedman Gans. And then that's game, set, match, Bulls.
Yeah.
It's tournament.
Yeah.
Bulls. And that the Lions couldn't recover from that. So the Lions are like, they're thereabouts. They have some great attacking elements. They're fun to watch. But loose plays like that are just going to keep killing them.
They kill them so often. Yeah, no, it's true. In other news, the Stormers had way too much for the Griquas, who have kind of cleared a space for themselves at the bottom of the pile.
That's one way of putting things.
They really are not up to speed with any of these sides, and the Stormers were no different. And to the Cheetahs also, in probably one of the games of the round, the Cheetahs and the Sharks. It was a funny old watch. I remember I was watching it. The Sharks edged it because the Cheetahs were so far from clinical. They were beautiful at times. Some of their attacking play in the middle third was fantastic, but then whatever happened
we were
to them.
talking about the potential awesomeness of that back three of Speckman, Yar and Blommachees, and I thought, like, Speckman obviously turfed that try that should have been, and Blommachees at times overplayed the ball, and they were just not quite there.
Yeah.
And the Sharks, like, they have definitely gone down a level in the absence of all these guys. The latest absence being out through injury. It's like, talk about breaking the back of a side. I don't know that there's a single back apart from Kerwin Bosch playing for them, who was playing for them when they were winning those Super Rugby games back in February.
It's a very new look side, and they look a bit just.
They look a bit new look as well.
Yes,
like, they look a bit early season.
Not quite. Yeah, exactly. Not quite up to speed with it.
To their credit, like, they went and got a winning try, and Kerwin Bosch played well, kept him in the game the whole way. I thought Marius Lowe at 12 looked a bit of a find.
Yes,
he looked
did.
very good,
very physical.
The Cheetahs actually took a score to potentially win the game, which was a clear Tian
pass.
Forward pass.
It was another forward. But I
think the ref was just like, surely they've scored this one.
Yeah,
it's like they couldn't have done. Like,
couldn't
let's
have
just
butchered another one.
Yeah,
could they? And
but they had.
That was the fact of it.
And I thought actually the Sharks were going to be robbed then, because that was undeserved. And then the Sharks actually went up the pitch, and the Cheetahs stole a ball so farcically illegally that I was like, oh, yellow card. Here we go. This is the Sharks win. And then he just no whistle. But the Sharks came back up the pitch and showed good clutch.
Yes.
And it was a Kerwin Bosch crossfield kick, I think.
That identified a load of space that was run in. It was the justifiable result, because the Cheetahs, having started this tournament like a house on fire with really a lot of verve and a lot of real good creativity, they've kind of dwindled round on round, and this display against the Sharks was it was hilarious. Like, literally in the middle third, they played stunning rugby, offloading, support runs, everything was beautiful, the tempo of it. And then as soon as they got 10 metres out from the try line, they'd botch it in all manner of creative ways. They must have botched around 15 scoring opportunities, close to, that they just turfed, or in some other way, including the try they scored was also a forward pass that they botched.
It wasn't a
like
try.
It was crazy white line syndrome to see.
They were kind of all over the place.
They were, and they've left themselves probably a bridge too far in terms of this. Just to take a look at the standings then, as we have it after the round 5, we have the Bulls sitting pretty atop with 19 points, a hefty margin between them and the Stormers and the Sharks on 13. That's a 6-point gap at the top. Then we have the Cheetahs at 12, just a point behind them.
Yeah, and then the Lions are out of it, on 10, and they also have a bye to go, so they're completely out of it. Pumas out of it, behind on 5, and Griquas out of it, behind on 2. So the dynamic there is that Cheetahs, Sharks, Stormers could still win.
Yes.
The Bulls' last game is against the Pumas, and there isn't a path for anyone else if the Pumas don't pull off a shock there.
Yes.
The Pumas, I have much more faith in the likes of the Griquas.
Oh yeah, the Pumas could have a shock.
Yeah,
and the Bulls
they're obviously
can still
missing Fouche, which is just
that is nightmarish.
Like if they still had Fouche, I'd be going, they'll give these boys a game. Obviously, it sucks that he's gone, but they have some great players. That's not actually this week. The Bulls have the bye this week.
They can just sit pretty atop the table and watch everyone else struggle down below.
But this week has some fun dynamics where, like, the Sharks are playing the Griquas. They'll be looking to rack up a score there and get to just a point behind the Bulls.
That's
if they can get a bonus point win.
And the Sharks, in terms of points difference, they're only on 5-4. They've
and is that the deciding
tries.
Margin?
I think it is either that or try scored, where they've only scored 9 tries to 11 conceded. Like the Sharks and their conservatism coupled with their rustiness has put them in a position where they really need to rack up a score here.
And 2 max outs probably wouldn't even do it for them then. So the Sharks are definitely in disarray in that regard, but they could still get to within a point of the Bulls and hope for a Bulls slip up of some sort.
That's
could win them.
That's what they're hoping for.
The Stormers play the Cheetahs to decide who will be the other team in contention.
That is the
exactly
week. Yes. The Stormers and the Cheetahs both on 13 and 12 points respectively. And that is a big game in Newlands on Saturday. That's kind of the box office one. The other game on Saturday is the Lions v the Pumas, which is total dead rubber.
It doesn't clash with another rugby game.
Yeah, there you go. 7.
Oh my God,
that's unusual for this tournament.
Would you not have put it on at exactly the same time as the France-Fiji game?
No. They're doing a good thing.
That's good.
That is one that is actually quite an interesting dynamic. The Lions Pumas, I think, is a bit of a dead rubber in which the Lions will probably have too much for the Pumas. Although we'll see. I like the Pumas. But the Stormers kind of have been a slow burner in the tournament. They were looking very rusty at the beginning, but showed enough clutch to get themselves over the line. Crucially against the Lions, actually, is kind of the one I'm thinking, where they really didn't deserve to win that game, but they did. And that's a really good sign in a team. Whereas the Cheetahs are kind of the opposite. They started like a house on fire and have kind of dwindled as the weeks have gone on, and are looking really to try and outrun and outflank the Stormers, where the Stormers are going to try and impose themselves physically on the
Stormers.
Cheetahs.
I tell you, Warwick Gallant finding form is great. He looked really good, because I was getting worried that he was going to be out of sorts himself. I think Razzie has ultimately been proving right in terms of the amount of time it was going to take for these Springbok guys to actually find their top form. Like, they would have to have been isolating for like 2 to 3 weeks already and playing their first game this weekend if they had stuck by the initial system, and they're probably just not ready yet. And I think Razzie is probably right.
There's
ultimately.
wisdom in what
There's
he's
probably
doing.
wisdom in it.
Well, it's just it does save egg on your face. We've seen a lot of this, just disjointed preparation, and it just means that the teams have been slower, or some teams have been slower than others, and some players are slower than others to get up to speed in this unusual season that it is. But definitely a good matchup there on Saturday with Cheetahs and the Stormers. And the Bulls sitting pretty with their bye this week, and in all likelihood are going to take this Super Rugby Unlocked.
Yeah, because next week or the week after next is the final week of it, despite the fact that the Curry Cup starts the week after and will incorporate, am I right in saying, all of the points, even though they're technically different teams in that the Bulls will become the Blue Bulls and the Cheetahs will become the Free State Cheetahs, where they allegedly hadn't been before.
Yes.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it's a bit of a higgledy-piggledy mess in this one. And then the other little caveat, the Cheetahs and the Cheetahs more so than the Lions. The Lions have had a shocking time of it and we're not going to be in contention. But the Cheetahs were in contention. They were in the lead, are in contention still. But they have a draw with the Lions because that game got COVIDed off a few weeks back, and they just put that in as a draw.
If they go max out, then you'd wonder about that draw.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so it's a little that's a little aspersion that I would cast over the tournament as a whole. But by and large, it's been a good spectacle. It's been good to see the South African guys.
I don't understand that if they've called that a draw.
They did though. Yeah. No, I only found it out when I was looking up the table.
It's one of those things where why punish teams if there's a COVID issue? They've all the time in the world.
Yeah,
just push it back a week. There's no issue. You have no fans. It just.
I know.
Relax.
Nope.
Push it back a week. Everything's okay. If someone gets COVID, just take the couple of weeks. It's fine.
And play the game.
Play the games.
Yeah, because you pulled yourself out of the Tri Nations to give yourself time.
No pressure. You're under no time pressure here to play these games. I don't understand that. But anyway.
But that's what they've done. They've declared it a draw. And it could be controversial if, as you say, the Cheetahs manage to go max out, which could be unlikely anyway. But that would cast a little aspersion on the tournament as a whole. But by and large, being a good spectacle. And it's been good to see the Blue Bulls getting a bit of cohesion and taking some nice tries, and certainly in the last few weeks after kind of a rocky start in the first couple of rounds, certainly the loss to the Cheetahs and then the stuttering performance against the Griquas as well. Now they look really more polished than I've seen them pretty much in years.
Mornay Stain, the man on show, how good has he been?
He's been excellent. Is he the guy? Obviously the Springboks aren't going to play this year, but
he's probably the guy outside of obviously Pollard.
Pollard is the guy, but who's the guy behind Pollard?
The problem with having Mornay as a backup 10 is that you're in the situation where you got an old man as a backup 10 and you're like, well, what am I doing here? He's not going to be playing in the next World Cup. Are you, Mornay?
Well, you never know.
But I think in terms of young up and comers, I think I'm looking at this because we have all the 10s here. Willemse has been a lot loose. He was very bad in the Springbok showdown at the start of the season. He's still never quite impressed me. He's obviously got some skills and got some footwork, but his capacity to control a game and his temperament and his big game, both physicality and control, are a bit lacking.
And I think likewise for Elton. I think you could level the exact same criticisms at Elton.
Elton's had his chance, and even to this day he's still thrown intercepts and he's not taken contacts that well, and he's club level. He's fine club level 10 without being a Springbok 10.
Yes.
Tian Schoeman looks very Springbok.
He looks more like Pollard. He's committed in the tackle.
He's big and strong. He's a big boot on him. He does make errors.
He does.
At the moment, you see where I'm leading on. At the moment, Kerwin's my guy. I think Kerwin's the guy who's the most clutch of any of them. He's got the fire in his belly.
And he's physical. Yeah. He'll make his tackles sometimes. And him and Schoeman, I think, are the ones front runners behind Stain, because I think Stain on form is the best of them.
Well, if the Springboks had to play next week, he'd probably just put Mornay at 10 because you know what you're going to get, and he's not going to do much damage.
Yes.
Whereas God knows, you put any of the others out there, they could have a mare and end up ruining the whole show.
Yeah.
But from Razzie's point of view, he's decided they're not going to worry about that for the time being
this year. But it's just with the mind towards the Lions tour, which is on the horizon in some way. It's a bit of a ways down, but it's obviously what Springboks and what all of this is going to be building towards. It's just a curious question: who is the 10 behind Pollard? I know it's a gripe that a lot of Springbok fans, and a worry that a lot of Springbok fans have, and it's a curiosity that we have as fans, and we're just kind of looking at it going, and who could it be? I wonder. But the one who's impressed most, and the team that's impressed most is Mornay Stain and the Blue Bulls.
You could say he's the guy who's sitting behind the most dominant pack as well.
That's true too.
There's an element of that.
There's a lot of Springboks in that pack, and the physicality.
What does Mornay look like these days if the pack goes backwards?
We don't know.
Yeah, so
we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So, but with all of that caveat attached, but still, Super Rugby Unlocked rolls on. Looking forward to round 6.
Absolutely.
With that, we will just stick with domestic rugby, but pivot up to Europe, a bit closer to home for ourselves. The Pro 14 has rumbled on. A few Monday night games have happened.
Yeah,
we as Leinster fans are happy out to be unbeaten, and not just unbeaten. We actually have a bonus point win in every single game so far.
Yeah, it goes beyond that actually in terms of Leinster obviously doing well, but the Irish sides in general in the Pro 14 have been dominant to a kind of a scary, almost farcical extent, and it's
worrying. It is worrying.
Yeah, there's definitely a fear there. I mean, if you look at the records of the Irish teams played 18 games. They combined 17-1 record, 17 wins, 1 defeat combined between the Irish teams. Now, if you pull all of the non-Irish teams in the league together, they've played 37 games and have a combined 11-26 record, 11 wins, 26 defeats. That juxtaposition is a madness.
Yeah.
And if they end up, they actually haven't settled on the format yet this year. They haven't settled on how they're going to go to playoffs.
Yeah.
It could be that it's just semi-finals and finals, in which case it could be all 4 Irish teams.
Yeah.
Listen, we're not naive enough to say, woo, aren't Ireland just amazing?
Yeah.
There's actual problems here in terms of the competitive nature of teams from the other countries. In fact, it's so bad, there isn't a single team that isn't Irish in the league that has a winning record. Everyone has a losing record, except for the Irish teams. Everyone's lost more than they've won. That to me is I mean, we're only 5 rounds in.
Yeah, that's it. It's early days. There's still time for
someone
form
to emerge.
happen. Yeah, but I'm still, I'm not all doom and gloom. But what I would say is that the standard used to be better than this. And the most recent game that we watched was Leinster A. Sometimes a bunch of Leinster kids with a few guys in there over at Ospreys. Not playing particularly well, but still racking up a bonus point victory. And I was just remembering those years ago when it was these guys were our rivals, man.
Yeah, this was a ferocious rivalry.
Yeah,
and there were better teams than the current Leinster team who couldn't get a win in Ospreys or couldn't get a win in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And that's just no longer the case. I mean, you've got players leaving. I think in terms of attracting talent, you're really starting to see the top couture in the Premiership money take its toll on the league.
You are. I think it started with the likes of Finn Russell and Laidlaw leaving Glasgow, and
just the likes of Leone Nakarawa going off to Racing. And, it's been a constant bugbear, and onwards it continues. You're not getting the best talent from other leagues, and you've gotten international players, Welsh players just pouring into the Premiership, Scottish players pouring all over the place.
Yeah.
Not good to see. Good to see from that regard. I still think as much as the South African teams will definitely help things.
They can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned. Get the Saffas in there to make it a bit more of a quality tournament, because but as you say, we need Welsh domestic rugby to be more competitive than it is. We need Scottish domestic rugby to be more competitive than it is, and they need that as well. We've seen with Wales, it was always a mystery to us. Leinster would win a European Cup or something, and yet Wales would constantly be better than Ireland in those slight edges. And it's the Welsh club sides could never do anything in Europe. Why are they mounting such a challenge? And I think Warren Gatland had a lot of credit to that. You're seeing now with PVAC, the kind of gloss has fallen off that, and I'm wondering, are the foundations strong underneath it? There's all of these sides all of these unions are struggling for money in the COVID years, such as it is. There's not a lot of money in Wales anyway, and that's a constant problem. So I'm wondering to see how we're getting out of that hole, or are we doomed as Leinster fans to send a bunch of kids out every week to win a game with a bonus point, which is delightful to watch, a lovely tri-fest, good to see our young kids being so effective. But it's also the last time we did that earlier this year, we came across a Premiership team and we weren't ready for it. in Saracens. It's
definitely it's given England the edge, the quality of their league versus ours at the moment, and France. There's no doubt about that. I don't think it's definitely harder for Irish teams to make the step up now. And from an Irish point of view, obviously we're in a better position where our guys are the guys at the top. We're not falling and floundering away.
Yes.
But even so, you would wonder how long before the dam bursts financially speaking. And while we're in a better place financially than Scotland and Wales, we're not able to compete with the big boys, the Wales and the France. And I wonder if they're, but for the grace of the foreign players rule and the Zebo rule that he keeps complaining about, go our teams.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's a good thing that they're still up there.
I think it is a good thing that we're still up there. But a team outside of Ireland needs to start playing some quality rugby in this competition quickly, because it hasn't happened yet, and we're 5 rounds in.
Yes. Meanwhile, over in the top 14s, Ron Nogara's La Rochelle team are finally starting to make waves.
I'm loving it.
Yeah. Top of the top 14s. They had a big win over Clermont last week.
Excellent.
To go top of the table. Yeah. And they're going from strength to strength. Jules Plisson is now the out half charged with learning from
understudy
Raj.
to Raj. And you saw for Richie Mwanga what that can do for a game. To be honest, he's one of the best, most savvy game managers from 10 that ever been.
It's positive for Plisson. I mean, he was in the French team as a young man, and then he was disregarded as not good enough as a very young man.
Yeah. And
now he's making his career as a stalwart club level pro, and all of a sudden, he could make the step up.
Yeah,
he's still in his 20s, and he's still young.
Yeah, and he's in the mix, considering the French squad is going to have to rotate. We could be seeing Jules Plisson and more from that La Rochelle team in that French jersey in the weeks to come in the Autumn Nations Cup. So all of that is exciting for sure. The top couture rolls on.
Yeah. Meanwhile, actually, Brive as well made history by starting a Georgian fly half. The first time, we talked about this earlier on. Tato Abzandadze starting. He for the first time a Georgian fly half.
I think it was not just Georgia. I think it was the first time a tier 2 out half had started in that position in a professional league. In the top
it was one of the first, because Ben Volavola started for Racing. I think so. But I mean, it's massive for Georgia to get a 10 in there, and it's massive for Tato to be in there. And he registered 4 penalties, and in fact his fellow countryman Giro Gadza scored a try that was set up by a nice pass off the left from Tato.
Good to see. Love to see that.
Definitely good to see.
Georgian airs. It's one of the best things about the top couture is the avenue for professional rugby to be played by the likes of these great Georgian players, these great Fijian players, these great Uruguayan players.
It comes at a cost. In terms of test rugby,
it can be a deal with the devil as far as the test rugby can be concerned. And Nadolo not going to the World Cup is still a crime against rugby, but it's still a professional contract for these guys, and it's lovely to see.
Absolutely, and they did end up losing the game, but definitely a positive to see there from Brive. But
with that we'll wrap up, because the Premiership ain't started yet.
Yes.
So we will move on to just the Bermuda 10s, which we mentioned in our last podcast for those who have made it this far in. Yes, the 10s continued and concluded, I believe.
Yes, right.
So we have a bit of updating to do, I guess, because much as the last time we were saying, I was bigging up the London Royals. We'd only seen the first round of action, and certainly the SX10 Cape Town franchise hadn't entered the fray yet because of COVID. So of those first few who started, we saw the London Royals looking pretty good with a lot of England Sevens men in there. The Miami Sun looking kind of competent and getting a couple of wins, and that saw Phoenix Middle Eastern Rugby kind of struggling, Asia Pacific Dragons kind of struggling for cohesion, and that has gone on. And
they played out a couple of rounds. The SX10 entered the fray and entered it with a bang. They had the likes of Collins and Gira and Cecil Africa, and actually Harry McNulty, our fellow countryman
from an Irish buddy. I'm a big fan of his hustle for Ireland Sevens.
All really classy players who are used to playing at the top level of Sevens competition. And all, as it happens, found a bit of form out of nowhere, which is great to see. Just like Fiji will against France.
That's the plan.
But they all found a bit of form, and they were all looking actually really, really classy, and came in, and then all of a sudden the SX10 were finding pumping teams, putting 30 on the Phoenix, and finding scores from everywhere. And Gira in particular, the Kenyan, was looking fantastic.
I'm a huge fan. He's one of the all-time legends of the Sevens game.
Him and Kenya coming, I remember when they came into this
top tier
series,
the World Series,
and he was just such a superstar, and they were such a they absolutely shocked teams. They were just a different mould of team, an African team, a real true African team. And that was great to see, and certainly great to see him taking part in this SX10 team as well. So they came in and completely changed the dynamic, and looked almost like the front runners to win the competition from very early on. They ended up having a 6-team playoff competition, which to my mind
is a bit moot when there were only 7 teams, so there was one to miss out.
You know what? They actually didn't. I'm now looking at it. I was looking at it that way. They had a 7-team. Everyone made the playoffs.
There you go.
I'm looking at it like now. Every team. London Royals finished top and had a bye. Through the initial playoffs. So it was all just about who was playing who and who had the bye. So the London Royals won the bye. The other teams played out quarterfinals, and you ended up with 2 semi-finals. The Ohio Aviators played the London Royals and only went and turned them over after their bye and got to the final.
Love it.
The Phoenix improbably bested the Rhinos to get to the semi-final, and they played SX10 but lost that game 12-0.
Yeah.
So the final ended up, perhaps the final that we'd all been hoping for would have been XX10 against the London Royals.
That probably would have been a bit more box office.
What we got was the Ohio Aviators against the SX10, which was an interesting game. It was the Aviators started up by owning the ball, took a 14-0 lead.
Wow.
And the SX10 couldn't get their hands on the ball. But then they did get their hands on the ball, and then they started to own the game, and actually they combined really well. Injera was the MVP of the final, and they just looked more dangerous and used their ball better when they had it, and racked up 3 tries and won the game 21-14. Although on the very last play of the game, they had to win a line out in their own 5 and kick it out.
Yeah.
And they overthrew it. Oh. And it went straight to the hands of the Aviators, and the Aviators were knocking on the door then until they knocked it on. They nearly threw it away.
Yeah, I love it. I love those dynamics though. And it was a great way to end the tournament, which was a great spectacle because, as we were saying in our last video on it, there was no Sevens tour. There was no possibility of it being feasible in this COVID time. Sure, it's tough enough to get regular test matches done. You can't do a dynamic where a bunch of teams are moving to a bunch of cities week on week on week. It's like exactly the opposite of what COVID is about. But in its stead has come this idea, which is a novel idea. The notion that it's going to crack the American market and become a big sport over there is folly, I think.
Hang on a minute. But they took the kickoffs off a tee, just like they do in the NFL.
Yeah, and rolling subs and special teams. No. But what it did make for was a really good, fun tournament in which a lot of those Sevens guys got a chance to play with like the combinations. SX10 alone, who won the competition, but to see Harry McNulty passing out there to Collins and Gira.
Yeah, what an experience for Harry.
Yeah, that's just great. Fantastic. And that was kind of what this tournament was all about. They were all out in Bermuda for a few days, and for a few weeks even, and played some really lovely rugby in the hot sunshine. What more could you want?
Absolutely. And congrats to the SX10 for that. As far as it goes, replacing Sevens, I don't think so. No. Sevens is in the Olympics, and I think Sevens is the better spectacle.
Yes.
Like, it's a little more rough and tumble, it's a little less open.
Yeah.
So the advantages of it doesn't have really the advantages of Sevens or the advantages of 15s. Because 15s is like a proper game where you're then invested in it for 80 minutes, all of these dynamics of scrums and lineouts and rucks and everything, and there's so many different ways you can play, and it's the ultimate game. For me, it's the ultimate game in sport. Whereas Sevens is more about the open field and the broken running. And this kind of is a hybrid between the two that doesn't quite work on either level. So from that point of view, I don't think it's coming as a replacement anytime soon. I also thought it was funny that in the final there were 5 tries scored, and every single conversion was a 2-point conversion.
There you go.
And when the dust settled on the conversion jeopardy, they decided to kick the 2-pointers.
There you go. Yeah, they weren't pot shotting as they were in week 1. Where they were like, I think it was the Ohio Aviators in week 1 that they just took everyone was a 5-point conversion.
They didn't do it in this time. They didn't do it.
Final footy, saying some principles remain true. But congratulations to the SX10, and fair play to Bermuda and the World 10 series for putting on a great show.
Absolutely.
And with that, we will wrap up our show with the rugby news of the week, our recurring segment to wrap things up. Another marathon show, but such as it is, there's a lot of rugby to be talking.
Rugby is all over the place.
Rugby all over the place. Rugby up the wazoo. And just in things that are making news this week, the Mitre 10 season, which we didn't have a chance to give a segment of its own, it's wrapping up.
Coming to a close. I would just like to ask any New Zealand fans, because I'm up to the wazoo in rugby myself. What exactly is the format of this tournament? Because I believe the regular season is coming to an end, and yet I look at the table and there's teams that have played 6 games, and there's teams that have played 9 games, and there's teams that have played 8 games. What's going on? I mean, how does this make any sense?
And there's teams from Division 1 that played Division 2, and then that counts different somehow for the points. I don't know what's going on. It's a very weird format. There's some great footy on show. I'll occasionally watch a game.
They're just good games. I just tune out of the format completely and watch the games. I don't know who's in Division what or what's going on. I just watch the games. And you do get some good games.
The better way to watch it, to be honest, because as soon as I start trying to do the research into it, it vexes me. Sort that out. Or if someone knows, then please drop a comment down below to let us know how things work
in the Mitre 10. Because what's going on there?
Illuminate us.
Is it just wrong? I don't know.
In other news, then, kind of good and bad from the women's rugby game.
That's right.
If you want to take this one, because
Yeah, and I mean it was mixed news, I guess you could call it, for the women's game. The remaining fixtures of the Women's Six Nations have been officially cancelled. They won't go ahead at all, which is definitely sucky news. Affecting. That sucks, and I understand why they did it. The organisers just cited the difficulty of putting them on, given the amateur status of the teams involved, and the people involved in putting it on have to work other jobs.
Yeah. Puts aside the altruistic side of the French side offering to come over to Ireland to play that last fixture because the Irish team isn't professional and would have had to self-isolate for 14 days upon return, which they can't feasibly do. And the French just offered to come over and then they got covered.
Yeah, I know. No, the world is just out to get all good acts at the moment, it seems. So that was definitely a bummer to hear that, and that's there were some rescheduled games that we would have enjoyed seeing go ahead, and that definitely sucks. On a more positive note, the two professional teams in Europe, England and France, are set to knock into each other twice this autumn. And
both
the BBC,
are being broadcast.
Yes, they have announced that they're going to broadcast both the games free to air, I believe on BBC Two, so proper premium television channel.
Just to harp back to some of those points earlier on, they could the South American rugby thing could learn. It's the SAR and a few others. Certainly Super Rugby with their kind of clamping down on any footage. Like, why would you not want why, if you were Super Rugby, why would you not want Squidge Rugby to do a video on your game? Like, why are you pulling all the footage? No, make it free to air. And it's like the women's game gets a tough enough rap anyway, but these two quality sides, France and England, two of the ones flying the flag for the pro game in the Women's Six Nations, to see them have two proper matches against each other is great, and then to have it be broadcast free to air, even better.
Broadcast on the BBC, like, there's a lot of eyeballs on that. That's great exposure for the game. That's great. Fair play to the BBC for putting it on. That's fantastic news, and I hope it does really well, and I hope they're banging games
for sure,
because getting more eyeballs and more investment into rugby. We're still a minority sport, and we shouldn't forget that.
For sure.
So that's definitely good news.
Then there's other news in that France will see the return of Trans-Tasman Super Rugby next year, because
if reports are to be believed, that's right.
Indeed. There's a report that there'll be a 6-week kind of competition post Super Rugby AU and Super Rugby Aotearoa, involving both teams from both sides, or both sides of the Tasman, I should say.
So presumably they'll function as a qualifier.
I'd imagine
the two domestic ones will function as a qualifier, and you'll get a combined Super Rugby performance. That's great.
That is great, because that's we were talking about this a few weeks ago. Probably the format going forward for Super Rugby is to have these domestic leagues and then have possibly a Champions Cup style format or some kind of post-season thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to the Champions Cup. I mean, not necessarily similar, and I get the logistics of not doing it exactly like the Champions Cup, where you dip in and out of each season. They might prefer to do a domestic one first and then the international one.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely. This format makes all the sense in the world. So yeah, looking forward to that. That's definitely a good story. It's apparently going to take place in May following the Aotearoa season, so that's good to see next year. This is a funny story. I just read this on Rugby Pass. Apparently New Zealand Rugby is incredibly disappointed in All Black star Ardi Savia, who keeps refusing to wear a mouthguard in matches, and has done it twice now in Bledisloe 2 and Bledisloe 4, and is caught on camera making tackles and carrying with his big teeth out. And it's like, Artie, what are you doing? Mind your teeth, man.
Yeah, I know. He's a back row forward. I mean, at that, he's an abrasive physical one. He's putting his head and all parts of his body in a compromising position. Like, I couldn't imagine going out onto a rugby pitch without a mouthguard in. I couldn't imagine doing any of those contact sports where you need a gum shield in. I guess.
Also, modern day, like, gum shields are grand. Like, I used to have frustrations with the little kid ones you used to get. They never used to fit right.
If they don't fit, then they're a pain in the arse.
But yeah, you mold them in, and they just, you suck them in. They're there. They stay there. They're not that big a deal.
I don't know if he's being obtuse, if he's making some kind of stand on anything. He hasn't.
He's not
making
a stand.
I doubt he is. But like, the only kind of rationale I can think is that some people have kind of like oral kind of phobias or oral misgivings about having things in their mouths.
The problem comes when he breaks a teeth. When he breaks a tooth, and then New Zealand Rugby has to pay for it, and he's already signed a contract saying I had to sign. Like, that's where it gets messy. Also, who wants to break a tooth?
You don't want to break a tooth. I don't know. Artie was unavailable for comment, so we don't know what.
We technically didn't ask him. So
no, we didn't. Say that. Yeah, no, exactly.
Artie. comment
down below. What's the deal?
Yeah.
Put your cum shield in, man. Jeez, you're in harm's way a lot of the time. But I did think that was a funny enough one. Yeah, New Zealand Rugby incredibly disappointed in Adi, who's meant to be a role model for some of these kids. Like, put your gum shield in.
Yeah, that's just a bit of an amusing one, but also not that amusing.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're going to wrap up the show with some good news, some major good news. The cash-strapped Rugby Australia has entered I'm just reading a Guardian article here. So they entered a brave new world after announcing a broadcast deal with Nine Entertainment worth $100 million dues over 3 years. I assume it's Australian dollars.
I'd imagine so. Yeah.
The free-to-air broadcaster simultaneously unveiled a new streaming service, Stan Sport, which is going to broadcast matches in partnership with Rugby Australia. And so they say they're going to reboot the game at every level. This is an interesting one. They're going to be it's a new broadcaster, it's free to air, it's got Super Rugby, all the Rugby Championship stuff, and it's a major deal with Rugby Australia. It's a bit of money.
I love that, because they need that.
Money and free to air broadcasting, what a combo.
That is an excellent combo for eyeballs, and couple that with a relatively successful Bledisloe series, albeit a losing one, and the international
one. I would say thoroughly, given how it could have gone.
Indeed, with new coaches. I think this could be a new leaf for in Australian rugby, and this they are a broadcasting company. They don't have the reek of venture capitalist investment. I know it's a 3-year deal, but this seems a bit more earnest than that. I'm apprehensive when I'm hearing about some of the Premiership deals and some of these guys that we have up here, the CVC types, and absolute pariahs. Beware the venture capitalist in rugby.
We come in, we make money, we get out.
Yeah, and we don't care what mess we leave behind when we're gone. That is to be wary, but this seems like something else entirely. This seems like a kind of a vote of confidence in the game and in the sport in Australia, and it's about damn time.
Yeah, it's massive. That's absolutely massive news. So on that positive note for Australian rugby and for world rugby, I would say I think it's time that we wrapped up the show and that we said Slán Awalya Oscuelga in Irish. Good night, everybody. It has been a long one, and enjoy the rugby. We will be back to discuss the next round of the Autumn Nations Cup and the Tri-Nations and all of these games. We're going to have 5 tests a week to talk about, so there's going to be plenty of our silly heads talking rugby.
Indeed, and if you enjoyed said silly heads, please do like and subscribe down below. Just share with your friends, your rugby loving friends, if you do as well, and ring the bell so that you get notified when we release our shorter vids, and please leave a comment down below as well, whatever your takes are, be they good, be they bad. You can disagree, you can agree, but we love to get
provided you don't think teams should take 3-pointers.
No, we have all takes, all kinds, but just keep it civil, but also leave a comment, because we do enjoy hearing your take on it.
Absolutely.
All
Listen,
right, guys.
all the best.
Bye. Alright, you're up. Just under.
Low.
A
little right.
A little right. Crooked feed.
Yeah. Sure, listen, we'll take it.
We'll take it.